The story kicks off with the oldest, darkest, and most notorious family of alchemists ever known, the Perserads. Obsessed with unraveling the secrets of the universe, they ran endless chemical experiments. These crazy alchemists left behind biochemical chaos everywhere, venom-spitting dragons, monsters towering over 65 feet loaded with steroids, and even brain-sucking mosquitoes. Yet, somehow, 3 centuries ago, the family's power faded away. Still, the brightest star among them, Iso Perserad, is hailed as the century's greatest alchemist. He vows to craft biochemical weapons that could rival gods themselves and restore the Perserad name. Throwing his arms wide, he declares that right this second, the ultimate apocalypse will be born, something he's been cooking up for over 400 days. He tells his partner, Dirty Rat, to start the process, but to keep the purification level at 70%. The big rat, named Cheese, snaps back, asking him to quit, calling him Dirty Rat. Then Cheese reports the fluids are at 99% and the temperature is steady at 25 degrees Celsius. With everything stable, Iso commands adding 52 grams of black sulfur, which Cheese does without hesitation. Next, 160 grams of white mercury, also done. Moving on, he requests 366 grams of yellow salt, and Cheese follows suit. Suddenly, stability drops to 72%. Iso instantly orders the tank opened, all fluids drained, and the pressure released, getting ready for the big reveal. Cheese disables the safety locks and announces that the creation chamber is set. The purple symbol on the machine glows brightly as Iso beams, thrilled that at last he's made the deadliest chemical weapon the world's ever seen. He admires the fearsome form of his calamity, arms outstretched. Confident, he declares this terrifying creation marks the first step toward world domination. But then, he notices the foot, the heart, and it hits him that this isn't a monster at all. Iso, dumbfounded, demands, "What the heck is this thing?" He insists on inspecting it up close because something feels off. Cheese warns him it's dangerous, but Iso pushes him aside, telling him to zip it. Standing in front of the girl, he can't shake the weird vibe. Maybe it's some mimicry trick like the Calamity is pretending to be a woman. That could explain those two huge spheres, which must be energy reservoirs powering the whole thing. He reaches out to touch, saying he has to test. Feeling the softness and texture, he's sure this thing's actually just a regular person. Iso wonders where the angelic arm of destruction he grafted went, or the Jade Eye of the Sorrowful Empress he implanted. Not to mention the Type 1 Tireless Heart he installed, yet he can't hear a single heartbeat. Suddenly, her eyes snap open, and Cheese warns Iso to watch out. Just as he starts piecing things together, it's too late. The girl attacks, pinning him down. Strangely, she's human-sized, saying, "What a shame." Still, looks like she's got to carry on the Perserad legacy. Iso even starts thinking about what his tombstone will say. The genius alchemist who wasn't killed by the city's heroes but by his own experiment. Iso yells at Cheese to help him, threatening to stuff a bunch of worms into Cheese if he doesn't. Naturally, Cheese flips out, complaining that he's going way overboard. But the red stuff that spilled, turns out it was just remnants of a flaming slug. Then he boldly proclaims that, as the greatest alchemist around, he won't be taken out by something he made himself. He reminds Cheese that he instructed him to add the soul extraction liquid to stop this creature from having the guts to hurt him. Cheese scratches his head and admits he doesn't remember adding anything like that. That's when he flashes back to the day Iso brought the mysterious liquid and told him to quit drinking it and pour it into production instead. Cheese had actually sniffed it, liked the smell, and ended up dumping it into his own drink. Now, in the present, he's pretty sure everything's about to spiral out of control. As I returns to the looming disaster, he claims she's his subordinate and orders her to fall in line. Suddenly, she stands up. He asks why she's creeping closer, and she grabs him like she's answering that question. The kid is instantly overwhelmed by a barrage of fierce attacks. In a whirl of chaos, he shoves her away, completely baffled. He bolts, yelling that he was exposed because of that filthy little rat and now needs the purification spray as soon as possible. He presses the button, trapping the girl again. She pounds on the glass, but she can't get a word out. Meanwhile, Iso splashes himself with purification spray and suddenly recalls a familiar face. He starts rifling through files, and Cheese asks, "What's up?" Then Iso finds records on the original body of experiment 2252. He's certain it's the same woman from before. Cheese suddenly remembers and confirms it's the girl they found with no arms or legs. But Iso also recalls her hair was purple back then, so why is it yellow now? I responds that this is the least of their worries. First, they need to figure out what caused her personality to change. Flashback to a year ago in the Golden City, by the Queen's Bank. People were peacefully going about their day, when nearby, someone had planted a chemical bomb. The timer hit 0 and poison gas began to spread everywhere. Meanwhile, Iso and Cheese were casually taking a bathroom break. The rat jokes he's pretty sure the dragon toxin's already been released. Iso pulls a mask from his bag, grabs a weapon, and it's go time. Inside the bank, everyone was already collapsed on the floor. As the pair stroll in, a guard orders them to freeze, saying the bank manager's on the way. But Iso shoots his tiny gun, turning the guard into a blob of slime. He even remarks how much cuter the poor guy looks now. Meanwhile, Cheese stops in front of a mother and her kid, announcing he's found his favorite thing. The mother pleads desperately for her son's safety, but Cheese does something even worse. He swipes the child's lollipop and strolls off humming. This was a good one. With that, they sealed up the place and began melting down the bank. They planted a bomb, everything exploded, and they broke into the cash vault. The little troublemaker was thrilled that everything went off without a hitch. Later, outside on the way home, he hummed happily, calling himself the genius alchemist of crime, saying there was no better title for him. Meanwhile, Cheese wanted to hit the bar and celebrate, but the other guy quickly shot that down, saying last time he ended up throwing money at some less than pretty ladies, so no way. All the cash was going straight into the Final Calamity. Once they wrapped up this experiment, the entire city would be their playground. Given the possibilities, Cheese admitted it actually made perfect sense. They glanced at each other and agreed that when that day came, they'd head straight to the mayor and dance along to the tunes. They chuckled, amazed at how alike they thought, but then, a sudden loud noise grabbed their attention. Instantly, they ducked down, and she whispered, "Someone's definitely tailing them." But Iso was certain the sound hadn't come from that close, especially with smoke billowing from his gadget. Nearby, a man named Homer, who worked for the city's security office, was hot on the trail of a girl who had totally exhausted herself and collapsed. She scoffed, feeling underestimated. They had just pulled off a bank heist, and here this guy was chasing someone completely unrelated. The tough guy admitted one squad from that group was strong enough to have taken down 5 of his detectives, but what he really wanted was the target list the Hell Hounds had tasked her to wipe out. If she cooperated, maybe he'd show mercy. He chuckled, adding that he'd forgotten every member of her squad had their vocal cords cut so they couldn't spill secrets. Suddenly, she reached behind her, but her move was swiftly blocked. Homer grinned, teasing her as a very naughty girl for trying anything under these circumstances. Then he noticed she was going for a teddy bear and wondered if she actually cared about that thing. At the same time, she grabbed his pants and emitted some garbled sounds, but he just smacked the back of her head and threw her down again. Stepping on her, he sneered, joking that apparently this odd bear meant a lot more to her. He tossed the bear near her face and gave it one final, crushing blow. Man, what a cruel bastard. Then he said since she wouldn't hand over the list, he'd take her body to claim his reward. That's when I showed up, clapping mockingly, saying I'd finally found this so-called nemesis of criminals around here. The old man pointed at me, asking just who the heck I was. Then the kid introduced himself as the city's most ruthless and wicked criminal, as well as the greatest alchemist of all the Baron. Apparently, he was keeping his family name on the down low. Cheese cleared his throat, and Iso quickly added he almost forgot to introduce his right-hand man, Dr. Madman Rat. Cheese jumped in to correct him, saying he wasn't Iso's lackey, they were equals in all this. Plus, his title was Madman, Dr. Madman Rat. Iso pointed out that the name was getting a bit too niche since Mad appeared twice, but Cheese argued repeating words makes it sound way cooler. That's when Homer interrupted, saying he wasn't here for childish games and they'd better run back to their mommies. The protagonist scoffed, saying he was obviously about to underestimate them once again. Both of them tossed sacks of money to the ground, saying this was the payoff from their latest heist. The old man eyed the piles and instantly knew these punks were the ones who hit the White Queen's bank. The two started acting humble, telling him not to flatter them so much. Right then, Homer sighed and drew his gun, saying it was the first time he'd met folks so happy to be accused of something. He then took aim and warned that normally bullets were too pricey to waste on amateurs like them. But today, he was willing to break the rules. Iso thanked him and said he was excited to see the top marksman in the city show off his skills. Then he wished him good luck, but the moment he pulled the trigger, the gun refused to fire. He felt a weird heat, and suddenly, his whole arm started shaking uncontrollably. Weakness washed over him, and he stumbled forward. That's when he realized the money bags were actually hiding poison. Iso grinned, saying it was way too late for him to figure it out. Breathing that gas for 8 seconds would knock anyone out, but he'd already been inhaling it for over a full minute. Homer then asked what the heck they were trying to do, save this woman or what. Iso just laughed it off, mocking him and saying he was a villain, so there was no chance he'd do anything as noble as saving someone. Then he pulled out a tiny gun and said they hated those so-called heroes of the city. Suddenly, the guy turned into a blob of green slime and dashed away. She chuckled, saying it was finally time to head home and enjoy themselves. That's when he spotted Iso standing with a girl and asked what the heck he was up to. Iso stayed silent, just staring, explaining he was curious how long she'd last. She'd already lost an arm and a leg, and her wounds were starting to rot. Homer hadn't been gentle either, and poor thing didn't have a single rib left untouched. He pulled out a siren and mumbled that he detected multiple toxins in her blood. It was honestly a miracle she was still alive, which made him even more curious about what made this woman so special. But she just scoffed and said, no matter what, she wasn't going to make it much longer, so they might as well head back. And besides, there was no way he was actually thinking about saving anyone. Iso replied that was simply impossible. He was the most wicked guy in Golden City. Saving someone? That would be an insult to his reputation. He grabbed his cloak, and Cheese admitted he was worried that for a second, Iso actually wanted to save the girl. Looking back, he saw her dragging herself along and thought it was amazing she could still move at all in that state, but he decided to let it go. After all, tons of people were decaying in this place. Then, a thunderclap rumbled and raindrops started pouring down that grimy alley. As the two walked away, they talked about how the city's sins would be washed away and everything forgotten. The poor girl was left behind, staring at her ruined teddy bear. She crawled for one last time, feeling a flicker of happiness as she pulled it close. Then she lost consciousness and drifted off. Or maybe not, because Iso came back, didn't he, folks? The scene then cut to the nightmare nest in the operations room. She asked if he understood what they were doing there. Iso answered they were performing surgery, but the big rat shot back that really, they were saving someone's life. He asked when his friends started, getting all sentimental and forgetting their real purpose. Iso insisted he hadn't forgotten a thing. The mission was to become the ultimate villain and restore the long-lost honor and glory of the ancient Perserad family. But, for the plan to work, they needed a biological weapon called the Final Calamity. And the body that could handle this weapon required a storm of negative emotions: pain, despair, rage, and sorrow. The toughest requirement? This weapon needed to carry a spark of kindness within it. Every experiment failed because they never found anyone who checked that last box. That's exactly why they needed this woman. She fit the bill perfectly. She claimed to understand, but she was seriously hurt and could pass away any minute. Iso said that's precisely why they kick off the final disaster right away. He told the rat to get the cocoon of despair ready just as they were about to start. That's when they took the blazing angel's arms, an emerald eye from the Sorrowful Empress, and an endless, unstoppable heart from a customized model, all to craft the cocoon of despair. With everything set, he announced it was time for the first miracle. Back to the present, he pressed her photo against the glass, confirming the likeness was undeniable. She asked what the plan was, and he said they'd kick off testing tomorrow. His friend wondered what they'd do if she failed. Iso replied that they'd just get rid of her. Failures didn't stay around on his watch. His room was filled with masks, notes, maps, and a poster of a very healthy-looking girl. This was Iso's place. He was sleeping soundly until he suddenly remembered the exact hit he took. That made him toss and turn in bed, wondering why sleep just wouldn't come. Feeling confused about everything, he decided that even though his place was ultra-secure, it couldn't hurt to check things out. When he got to the core, he saw she was still there. At least, that was a relief. But then, he noticed she was trembling. That's when he thought maybe the so-called Final Calamity was scared of sleeping alone at night. He looked away, claiming it didn't bother him. After all, she was just the product of an experiment, likely flawed anyway. But then he stopped himself, recalling her attack and the sadness he saw in her. With a sigh, he gave in and opened the chamber door, telling the Final Calamity to hurry up because he'd take her somewhere more comfortable to sleep. Naturally, she lit up with joy, cheeks flushing. They strolled through the Level 7 observation room for high-risk creatures. There was one dangerous specimen called the Wild Dragon that growled it would gulp you down whole if freed. Another was the Abyssal Eye, which warned that if it broke loose, it would haunt your mind forever. Iso smirked, saying those two were the calmest around, so that's exactly where he was leaving her, right between them. The girl looked a bit puzzled, but he was already walking away, saying he'd get some sleep as the monsters shouted at him. Back in his room, he plopped down on the bed, mumbling that at least now the Final Calamity wasn't alone. Finally, he drifted off peacefully. Meanwhile, the Wild Dragon turned to the Abyssal Eye, wondering why. A human girl was placed between them, creatures so fierce. The Abyssal Eye said it had no clue, but noticed Iso calling her the Final Calamity. The dragon burst out laughing, saying there was no way such a tiny human could be the feared Final Calamity. The Abyssal Eye joined in, joking she was probably just another one of Iso's many flops. Truly hilarious. The little girl slammed on the glass in distress, but the dragon warned that Iso's crystal glass was unbreakable. Not even in its B0 form could it get a scratch on it. The Abyssal Eye told her to throw in the towel. It had already blasted the glass with countless laser beams, but nada. Then out of nowhere, the girl paused for a moment. Her hands started changing, turning bright red and bursting into flames. Both of them jumped back, and the moment her hand touched the glass, cracks spider-webbed across it. They just stood there, watching, trying to make sense of it all, when suddenly the entire glass chamber shattered into a million pieces. She stood there, confused, staring at her own hand, completely baffled by what had just happened. Meanwhile, the dragon's jaw had literally hit the floor and the giant eye was shaking in fear. The dragon immediately dropped to his knees, apologizing profusely, saying he now truly respected Big Sis, but all he wanted was her help to break out of that place. The Abyssal Eye echoed the same, promising to serve her forever if she helped them escape. Meanwhile, during all this chaos, Iso was peacefully asleep, and Cheese had passed out from drinking too much. Then bam! The facility's alarm blared. Quicker than firefighters putting on their gear, the big rat asked what the heck was going on and why the alarm was level 4. Hiso explained that this kind of alert only goes off when at least 3 security barriers get destroyed. Inside the elevator, he said that the ones who had escaped were the dragon and the Abyssal Eye. But something else had gotten out of room 203, which was odd since that room was supposed to be empty. Straight away, Theo whipped out his tablet, insisting he had to see this with his own eyes. That's when the final disaster unfolded, smashing every last piece of glass. But instead of panicking, he actually cheered, celebrating that she had triggered the arm he transplanted. Meanwhile, he wanted to know how the girl who was meant to be in a different room ended up right there. They reached the high-risk experiment zone. Both stepped into the room where the dragon and Abyssal Eye were causing total mayhem. Isa asked if these two had finished their little fun yet. You could almost see the creatures suddenly tuck their tentacles between their legs. The dragon, however, stepped forward, snarling, declaring he'd finally found the jerk who locked him up for so long. It was payback time. But Cheese pulled out a gun and fired right at the dragon. A thick yellow mist filled the air, and the creature immediately asked what that was about. Isolo smirked, explaining it was a grenade packed with over 200 dragon spider eggs, and as a dragon, he should know exactly what that meant. The beast shuddered, admitting that those cursed spider creatures were a deadly breed of dragons. They infest and feed on other beings, and anyone unlucky enough to get infected bites the dust. Isa gave props, saying, at least he's sharp. But while all this was going down, the Abyssal Eye seized the distraction to charge up a blast, aiming to obliterate them both on the spot. Yet Isa knew the Abyssal Eye's weak spot. The more energy it packed, the more vulnerable its eye became. The flashbang exploded right in front of the creature, sending it crashing to the floor, blinded and screaming in agony, cursing the bastard who wanted to blind him forever. Isa then asked if they were going to keep wrecking the place or if they were ready to go back to their cages. But the dragon shot back that they weren't giving up, not now that they had Big Sis on their side. The Abyssal Eye nodded in agreement. She claimed she could melt the glass in this place, so Isol didn't stand a chance against her. Isto frowned and asked who this big sister was supposed to be. The two creatures immediately bowed, and the girl stepped forward, positioning herself right between them. Now he finally knew exactly who they were talking about, and if she had truly lost control, things were about to get messy. The dragon grinned wide, mentioning that it had been ages since he'd seen Izzo pull such a scared face. Then he leaned in toward the girl and whispered that Izizo was a ruthless man. He trapped all the creatures here like lab rats and treated them terribly. The final experiment was pressing forward with a commanding presence, sending chills down everyone's spines. She urged Iso to activate the emergency protocol right away. But Iso revealed there was unfortunately no way to guarantee complete safety from the ultimate disaster. Suddenly, in a flash, she sprang at them. Isa jumped, tackling him to the ground. The massive dragon chuckled, saying he was eager to watch Iso beg for mercy before getting infested with eggs. If Iso hesitated too long to answer, Big Sis would end his life. But then, he noticed something weird. She wasn't attacking him, she was doing that slick move again. He scowled, demanding to know what on earth she was doing to him. Iso tried to push her off and asked if she was done yet. She attempted to climb back on, but he sighed and said he got what she wanted. She didn't want to sleep here. She wanted to go somewhere else. She pushed against him once more, and he scolded her for acting like a dog. The wild dragon called out to her, telling her to use that move again, the one that shattered the glass. That's when Isol understood why she'd suddenly triggered that power. They headed back to the elevator, but she kept mashing all the buttons, creating total chaos. Meanwhile, the wild dragon was strapped into his shiny containment suit, yelling at Yuzo to come back and take it off before everyone here started laughing at him. In the Abyssal Eye's chamber, Izuzo left a pile of onions. Then, we glimpsed a baby nine-headed hydra. The creature blinked an eye, and right beside it, the Calamity was staring back. She kept her gaze fixed, and I noticed it seemed like she refused to sleep in the lab. The problem now was figuring out where she'd crash for the night. She said it was simple, just let her sleep in his room. But Iso immediately called that idea crazy. She was an experiment. Suddenly, the scene switched to a shaky surveillance feed where someone called out for Detective 5682. It looked like they were in some kind of hotel, but the footage kept glitching. Then the image stabilized, and they wondered what had happened here to leave so many bodies lying around. All that was left were skeletons, and they questioned what kind of terrifying creature could have done this. Suddenly, the detective started coughing violently, and the person recording asked what was wrong. He stared down at his grimy hand and warned he'd been poisoned. At that moment, someone approached, announcing that another meal had arrived. Looking up, he came face to face with a black dragon and a seriously intimidating woman. The artist definitely gave them the attention they deserved. The creature on her back lunged at the detective, and then the camera cut out. That was an extra chapter I ended up narrating without even realizing it. Now, we're back with our guy and his trusty rat sidekick. Just as she told him to hit the hay, Iso flat out refused. But the rat was insistent, claiming that the disaster girl could only feel at ease when she was near him. Iso scoffed, pointing out that was pretty clear already. He made sure to toss in an ingredient that made absolutely sure she wouldn't hurt him. Then she dropped the bombshell he hadn't added the soul extract at all. Nope, he downed it like it was a fine glass of wine. Iso was about to scold him, but his buddy quickly shifted the blame, saying it was on him for bossing people around while drunk. As he argued with the rat, warning that if she lost control, everyone would be toast, she was quietly having fun playing in the fish tank. That's when he realized she'd already plunged in and was tugging at the hydra. The creature seemed ready to bolt, but the girl chased it behind a rock, totally set on her mission. Meanwhile, Izuzo shouted at Xiao Ju that the hydra was not a plaything and ordered her out. Cheese kept munching his cheese as our guy kept insisting she get out. When she ignored him, he grabbed her leg and started pulling. The poor girl was going through some serious pain. He fell to the floor. And guess what happened next? She had plenty of powers, including squeezing things with gravitational force. Iso might be a master alchemist, but when it came to raw strength, he was outmatched by magic like that. Meanwhile, Cheese was laughing at his misery. With a bruise already forming on his face, Iso laid down the law. Disaster Girl was never to enter Shoju's tank again. She started to walk away, telling Iso he could keep an eye on the Disaster Girl himself. Iso was about to protest, but the big cat told him to chill out. The girl was actually really gentle and fragile. Just don't let her go full berserker or things would get seriously bad. Our guy thought it was hilarious, calling her gentle. After all, she was just an experiment. But right then, she sneezed. Turning around, he saw her look pained. That's when the poor alchemist realized this sickly experiment was going to need a bath. Later in the bathroom, he used a scanner to check if she had any viruses tucked inside. But after scanning 3 times, the device still came up empty. He couldn't believe he was actually letting one of his experiments use the bathroom. He told her to hurry up and wash while he stepped out. But the Apocalypse Girl looked totally confused, and he got why right away. He pointed at the door, saying he was heading that way, then pointed at her, telling her to just follow along. After acting it out, he told her to step in and get it over with. She thanked him, saying she understood, then immediately obeyed, surprising him big time. With his eyes closed, he wondered why he was even feeling embarrassed. He told himself to get over it. But as soon as he opened his eyes with confidence, that confidence lasted barely a second before he hit the floor, knocked out cold. Later, he's holding the shower head, pinching his nose tight. Frustrated that she was causing such a fuss, and he was stuck helping with this. He lathered up some shampoo and warned her not to open her eyes or she'd go blind, and that definitely wouldn't be on him. Then he told her to turn around and sprayed water on her face to rinse off the soap. Watching her face, he couldn't help but think this carbon-based life form had done a stellar job fooling him. He turned off the water, told her to manage the driving herself, and then said he was heading out. He also warned her this would be the last time he'd lend a hand she'd learned her lesson, so he wasn't stepping in anymore. But, as if fate was having a laugh, he tripped, did a full flip, and tumbled straight into the water. Poor guy even smacked his head and groaned. Right then, he wished he'd just dragged her to the machine room and sprayed her with a water gun instead. She looked a bit puzzled but tried to help him up. Just then, she walked in, mentioning that he'd found the color of rebellion that would stop her attacks. Then he caught sight of the whole scene. Without saying another word, he turned on his heel and left, commenting that it seemed like the two of them had already settled things. He slammed the door shut but quickly popped it open again to warn Ezo that if he planned to do anything, he should suit up properly. Right after that, a bar of soap whizzed past him, and off he went. Outside, Cheese muttered about how impressive it was. For all of Izzo's genius as an alchemist, he was totally clueless in experience. Gazing at a photo on the wall, he wished the masterpiece and promised to look after the boy. Shortly after, he stepped in to assist with the experiment, grabbing a strand of hair to plug in and started drying her off. However, when she noticed the shape of the device, memories of past life blastings flooded back. He talked with his eyes closed, saying her hair was still damp, but when he opened them, she vanished. He wondered where she had slipped off to, then spotted her trembling behind the curtain. Not knowing what spooked her, he pulled the curtain back and coaxed her out. It was getting late, yet there she was, curled up in a corner, clearly shaken but without explanation. After thinking it over, he guessed the hairdryer might have been the trigger. Remembering how Homer had battered her in that alley, it made sense she'd have trauma from anything similarly shaped. He sighed, muttering that, without a doubt, she was a real handful. Since she was still shaking, he stopped and called the disaster girl. When she turned around, he pulled out the hairdryer. She flinched, covered her head, and curled up again. Then he turned it on, letting a gentle breeze blow. Slowly, she peeked one eye open and found herself staring at him, who was aiming the hairdryer at his own face, letting the warm air blow on him. Her scared look melted into a small giggle. Later on, she was drying her own hair and having a blast. 20 minutes flew by, and she was still having fun with it. That's when he realized he probably should have let her keep being scared of the darn thing. Half an hour later, he yanked the hairdryer away, saying that was enough. Her hair was fully dry, but she still looked like she wanted to play with it more. So he warned her that turning on the charm wouldn't get her anywhere. He locked the hairdryer in a drawer, turned the key, and told her to get some sleep already. The poor girl just sat there, clueless, still hadn't even learned how to talk. Meanwhile, Iso knew the real tough part was just starting. Where on earth was he supposed to get this wild card to sleep? First off, no way in hell was she crashing in his bed. That was an unbreakable rule for any self-respecting alchemist. Just as he glanced back, she was already curled up, fast asleep on his bed. He gently pulled her off, scolding her for breaking the rules. A little time passed, and now he was stretched out on his bed while she sat on the floor, pouting. He reminded her that she was an experiment, and experiments weren't allowed on the bed. He was already showing mercy, letting her sleep on the floor as long as she stayed quiet and didn't move around too much. With that, he switched off the light, finally feeling like he could get some peaceful rest. But then a thought hit him. Even though she had been aggressive earlier, what if she went full berserker mode in the middle of the night? He flipped over but found the poor girl lying there completely still, not reacting to a thing. He laid his head back down on the pillow, deciding the odds of her attacking now were pretty slim. He tried to get some sleep until he heard a noise right next to him. He told her to stay put. He was seriously trying to fall asleep. A moment of silence passed. He smirked, but then she made another sound and he told her to quiet down. He turned toward her and asked if she was really planning to keep this up all night. That's when he noticed she was shaking on the floor. Her face twisted in pain, leaving him totally confused. Meanwhile, in another room, Cheese had dozed off while watching some top-tier content. Iso caught a glimpse of what was on the screen and immediately called it disgusting. He slapped the rat's face, telling him to wake up, but Cheese just scratched his cheek and rolled over. Iso concluded that if Cheese was going to pretend he was asleep, he'd have to handle this himself. Sometime later, he brought an insect snack and shoved it right under Cheese's nose. The rat instantly shot up, vomiting everywhere. Cursing, he demanded to know what was wrong with his dumb friend, but Iso just shrugged and said it was his fault for letting that disaster girl get so close to him. Then Io demanded a blanket. He needed one. She smirked, teasing that he already knew it was for the girl. The boy always complained about her, but his soft little heart couldn't stand to see her suffer. Iso explained that she had several tests to face tomorrow and really needed a solid night's sleep. She suggested he just use one of the 6 or 7 blankets they had, but Iso insisted he had one for every lunar cycle and day of the week. The second Sunday was the day of Ouroboros, so he used blankets representing the endless cycle. Tuesday and Wednesday were dedicated to knowledge and alchemy, so those blankets boosted his smarts. Thursday was purification day, so he grabbed the purple one, his master's favorite color. And Friday was all about sharpening his criminal instincts, so he slept under the spade-patterned blanket. He was about to explain Saturday when Cheese cut in, saying he already knew that was the infamous disaster blanket. Iso was impressed he got it exactly right, which meant there were none left to lend to the girl. Cheese plopped down and told him to just give her the disaster blanket anyway since, technically, she was the disaster. Iso was stunned by the rat's perfect logic and realized he was out of arguments. He tried to argue, but the rat turned away, said goodnight, and ended the debate. As Cheese walked off, Iso wondered why a rat even needed a blanket. Standing in front of several safes, he opened the one marked Saturday. He laid it on the floor and told her this was an incredibly precious gift, something the master was entrusting her with. With that, she finally drifted off, curled up beneath the shadowy image of a creepy creature. Dark circles settled beneath his eyes. He mumbled that maybe he should have strapped that anti-rebellion collar on her. But his brain was totally fried. He couldn't even respond. He just crashed into sleep. Some time passed, and suddenly she wasn't under the blankets anymore. Instead, she was standing right beside Izu. Later, a crow swooped down, holding a clock in its beak. It dropped the clock straight into the mouth of a skeleton. The creature immediately started yelling, saying it was time for the greatest alchemist of the century to wake up. It kept shouting and repeating until our guy finally stirred awake. He was annoyed because he forgot to turn off that darn thing, all thanks to that wild girl. That's when something odd caught his attention, a strange weight, a weird breathing rhythm. This kid had some serious instincts. The moment he figured out what it might be, he asked himself, could it really be? Of course it was. He had no clue when she had sneaked onto his bed. Yet there she was, sleeping soundly, totally ignoring everything around her. Right then, a thought crossed his mind. She didn't have a single one of those disaster traits she was supposed to have. Just then, Cheese burst through the door, asking how his night went. But when he glanced around and didn't see the girl, he immediately asked where she had taken off to. The answer was that nobody had a clue. That was enough to send Cheese into a panic, warning that letting a creature like that wander around was super dangerous. Iso agreed it was a massive risk. He ordered the big rat to head straight to the monitoring room for a status check. Cheese started on his way, but then noticed something odd. Something was twitching underneath the blanket. He pointed it out to Isizo, but Isizo just scoffed, asking if Cheese had suddenly lost his vision, like a blanket could move by itself. Suddenly, Disaster burst out, panting hard. Without missing a beat, Isizo tried to explain she crawled into his bed during the night. He had no idea what had happened. Still, Cheese sat down beside him and nodded, saying he got it. Growing up is a rough patch for any guy. No need to feel embarrassed. But Iso cut him off and tossed a stink bomb right at his face. While Cheese wriggled around in agony on the floor, Iso repeated himself. He'd already made it clear she was the one who climbed into his bed, so Cheese needed to drop the nonsense. Later on, in the experiment analysis room, Cheese told her to quit bouncing around so they could measure her height. Turns out, she was 171 centimeters tall. She turned to Iso and joked that if he ever wanted to kiss her, he'd have to tiptoe since she was 11 centimeters taller than him. Naturally, our guy protested loudly, insisting he had zero interest in that. Next up was the weight test. She came in at 64 kilograms. Iso found that strange the parts he'd assembled should have weighed at least 800 kilograms total. Then the rat announced it was time for the most crucial measurement of all. With a grin, he said, Io's got lucky, she's got a perfect size 36. The next test was lung capacity. Isizo took the deepest breath he could manage and blew into the measuring device with all his might. The little bat on the scale lifted a bit, and she got all fired up. He handed it over to her, saying it was her turn. She braced herself, but she was holding her breath in a weird way, so he told her to just bleed like he did. But she totally misunderstood and grabbed his face, blowing all her air straight into his mouth. The poor guy staggered backward, tripped over the table, and naturally, right then she walked in, asking how the breathing test was going. While our guy was gasping for air, the rat just nodded calmly, saying he was starting to get the hang of it. Meanwhile, the Apocalypse girl looked puzzled, wondering why the little bat didn't move a bit. By that time, Isa was already at the sink, furiously rinsing his mouth. Cheese casually mentioned that Isa was probably the first person in history to do something like that. Our guy snapped at him to shut up. Cheese just laughed, pointing out he'd been told that a lot lately, but what he really wanted to know was if that disastrous kiss was any good. Right then, Ezo splashed water right at him. The rat laughed it off, saying he didn't even need a mask. He tested her dozens of times, no viruses to worry about. Next up was a flexibility test, which showed she was right within normal human limits. Then came the lower body strength test. Again, her strength was completely standard. Even the hand grip test came back with average results. Iso commented that with all this, she was basically just an average person. But Cheese argued none of that mattered. He guessed she probably had a combat mode, and that's where her real stats would come through. Iso agreed. It was time to activate that so-called combat mode. Cheese asked how to do that, and Iso explained they just had to pit her against the cruelest, most ruthless experiment they had. The scene shifted to a super dangerous girl locked inside a cage. She even made a tiny doll of Iso, saying she missed him. But Cheese immediately protested. This was way too risky. Throwing anyone into a fight with test subject 0 was pure insanity. They needed to take it slow. The first opponent should be something weak, like a rabbit. However, Iso grabbed a tiny rat and asked if that wasn't the weakest creature they had. She snapped it out of his hands, saying rodents were never used for experiments in this facility. Our guy picked up the rabbit and asked Cheese if he really thought this would trigger her fighting instincts, but suddenly she snatched the rabbit and carried it over to a corner. She declared that this was solid proof she had killer instincts. Iso cheered, saying maybe this wouldn't be as hard as he'd expected. Except, of course, she was just petting the rabbit. What on earth did this guy expect? He collapsed in frustration, but then reached into his pocket, pulled something out, and injected it into the rabbit. She immediately demanded to know what he'd just done. Our guy revealed it was madness mutation number 6. Suddenly, the rabbit's eyes changed, and it started twitching violently in her arms. A huge shadow loomed over the girl as the rabbit finally transformed. Iso smirked, saying that to wake her powers, her opponent had to be at least this strong. For now, the creature's name would be Super Wild Rabbit. The beast was already snorting smoke, winding up a punch, and our guy was eager to see how this fight would turn out. Meanwhile, Cheese was amazed at how Iso really had zero mercy. As the monster lunged, the rat asked if he wanted to bet on whether she'd dodge the punch or take it head-on. Aso declared that whoever lost would have to spend a whole week cleaning the base, and he was pretty sure she'd be the one taking the hit. With that, the rabbit lunged with full force. Both of them flinched. The place was empty, not even the monster had a clue where the girl disappeared to. Then the creature felt something strange crawling up its arm. When it glanced at its shoulder, there she was. The beast crumpled to the ground, but she just gently petted it. Even the monster seemed to blush a little. At that moment, Cheese realized this girl had zero interest in fighting. The next scene showed them heading straight into the seriously dangerous zone. Apparently, they were going to visit number 0, but the rat still thought it was way too risky. However, Isa said if she died, that meant failure, and failures just taught him how to improve the chances in the next experiment. Behind that huge door awaited number 0. Isol and Cheese both put on their masks, but his friend kept saying it wasn't too late. They should just give up since they'd invested so much in this girl. But Azo said he needed to see her charge forward with the aim to kill her target. Otherwise, he'd never get to witness her true transformation. He'd had too many failures lately, and honestly, he was just tired of it. Then, she gently patted his head, catching him totally off guard. He grabbed her hand, reminding her experiments couldn't afford to feel sorry for their creators. She stepped closer, telling him she would unleash every bit of power she had, because if she didn't, number 0 would be the end of her. She existed to become the strongest biological weapon and help him take over the world. She even joked that he should appreciate her looks. Instead, it's such a waste to throw all that beauty into battle. Meanwhile, behind the massive gate, number 0 was busy counting tiny things. She was making little puppet versions of him. This creature was an incredibly high-risk entity, a beast dubbed Lucille, the Black Plague incarnate. Just then, someone called out her name. She turned around. Who did I say was here to talk? She dissolved into black mist, gripping the cage bars, voice brimming with excitement. It had been exactly 1,322 days since they last met, but Isizo simply said he came to tell her he'd finally created the ultimate disaster. She was no longer the strongest creature in his possession. Lucille was stunned. She immediately denied it, insisting it was impossible. She was still the most powerful being in the entire lab. Iso just told Cheese to bring in the final disaster, but she had already dashed forward and embraced him. Clinging to the cage, Lucille wasn't confused. No, it wasn't confusion at all, it was pure jealousy. She snarled, demanding the filthy blonde keep her hands off him. The little disaster hid behind him, and our guy introduced her to Lucille, the final disaster, the strongest creation he'd ever made. If Lucille wanted to reclaim her title as the top experiment, she'd have to defeat the blonde. Whistle bit her lip in frustration, then smirked, fine, but if she wins, Isa will owe me an entire day. He accepted the deal at once. Then she threw in, if he sticks around for a day, he's gotta let me hug him while he sleeps. But our guy immediately said that was way too much. This Lucille was definitely strong, worthy of the number 0 experiment title. She told him not to worry. She was about to crush his latest creation. He walked away, saying he just had to prove his point. Then he stepped through the door, warning of an inevitable disaster. If she didn't fight this time, she was really done for. And if she died by Lucille's hand, he wouldn't feel even a shred of guilt because that would mean she was a total failure. Besides, he had no plans to interfere or save her. She looked puzzled until he untied the cord connecting them. The door slammed shut right in front of her, and she jumped in surprise. This poor girl kept catching all the bad breaks. It was starting to feel downright cruel. She pounded on the door, but Isizo stood firm on the other side, clearly unfazed. He muttered that he was right. This was exactly how a true Purser descendant should treat their test subjects. At last, everything was back on track. He then made his way to the monitoring room. She asked about their conversation, but Iso just told him to release Lucille. The rat was annoyed, but pressed the button anyway. The cage began to lift, and Lucille stretched, remarking it had been way too long since she had room to move. The room was lined with cameras, and she immediately stared into one, telling them both to brace themselves. They were about to witness something spectacular. She then handed Iso a bag of chips, promising this was going to be good. But Isizo grumbled that he was getting tired of everything tasting like cheese. The rat took offense, pointing out Iso never used to complain before. Iso assured him that if Lucille actually went for the kill, the collar would activate, cutting off the disaster's powers. Time for another bet. Who would come out on top in this fight? The rat bet on Lucille, and if he won, he wanted the TV remote for a whole week. Iso bet on the disaster girl because if she lost, she'd be dead. Inside the chamber, Lucille told her to quit banging on the door. It wasn't budging. Then she wondered what was going on with this girl. She showed zero interest in fighting but activated her powers anyway, saying it didn't really matter. Once she finished her off, she'd have her all to herself. At that moment, she said things were getting dangerous. Lucille was closing in, and the disaster girl hadn't flinched at all. Lucille reached out, ready to absorb her as her next meal. But suddenly, something grabbed her arm. It was the little blonde disaster. Lucille had no clue how she moved so fast. Instantly, the two guys got pumped. Finally, she was switching into battle mode. They high-fived, excited that things were finally heating up. But then the little blonde just started walking. Lucille was confused. What was she aiming for? Then the blonde pointed to the door, and both of them realized she was actually asking Lucille to help break it open. Obviously, Experiment Zero was furious at such a silly request, but the little blonde just smiled and nodded. That was exactly what she wanted. Right then, the monster burst out laughing and completely lost it. She turned to the camera, speaking to little Iso, calling his latest creation an absolute idiot. She grabbed the girl's arm, saying she'd show her the easiest way out of this room. Lucille's poison started to spread. She gloomily thought the Black Plague virus would turn her into a pile of bones in no time. The blonde collapsed to the floor while Lucille laughed, saying it was way too easy to take down the so-called disaster experiment. She then grabbed her face firmly and told her to never forget this moment. Little Iso belonged to her now. On the disaster unit's screen, red warnings were flashing everywhere. It alerted that the virus was spreading rapidly, attacking both her organs and her entire bloodstream. Iso insisted this was impossible because the blood they used for her was supposed to be resistant to any virus. But there she was, lying on the floor, obviously and seriously infected. Lucille sat back, chuckling, saying this wasn't even entertaining. She yelled at him to stop this right away, but Iso told her to calm down. He explained that only about 30% of her blood, 42% of her organs, and 38% of her nerves were infected, so it wasn't fatal yet. He was confident that once she neared death, her powers would kick in. Meanwhile, Lucille was stomping on the girl's head, calling to Iso, asking if that was the best he could do. While the blonde couldn't respond, Lucille kept taunting her. She asked where the burst of energy was that the girl had when begging for help to open the door. She yelled at him to stop again because the virus had already spread to 70% of her body, but Iso calmly pointed out she had a mechanical heart, which couldn't get infected. Plus, the virus hadn't reached her brain. Lucille scoffed, as if to say it didn't seem like he cared about the girl at all. And if that was true, then it was time to finish this. The virus seemed to surge as it spread all over her body. The blonde began to levitate as Lucille smirked, saying it was time to start the absorption. She bit into her cheek, remarking that despite being a flawed experiment, she actually tasted pretty good. The plague beast sank her teeth into the girl's stomach, saying the real feast was just getting started. He urgently announced that he was activating the collar. 90% of that experiment's body was already compromised, but just as he was about to press the button, Iso grabbed his hand. The rat asked what he was doing, but the boy insisted the time wasn't right yet. She thought her friend had totally lost it. Did he really want to watch Lucille tear the experiment apart? But Iso snapped at her to be quiet. You're just a dumb rat. You only care about her because she's pretty. You've never cared about the other experiments. Don't lose sight of the Perser family's true goal. Both Lucille and the girl are just pawns for the real ambition. Then, a trembling voice called out, Master. The screen was flashing with alerts, and he saw the request came from the girl. Cheese was shocked to hear the disaster speak, asking if he had taught her anything. He replied, maybe just a little less than the night before. A little earlier, when she tried to climb into his bed, he pushed her off, warning that experiments don't sleep with him. But when he looked at her, she seemed shaken and sad. So he cleared his throat and sighed. He said if she called him master, he'd make an exception and let her lie there for 30 minutes. Though her vocal cords had been removed in the past, the new body he'd made obviously had none missing. Still, though she tried, nothing came out. That's when he realized the truth. She had vocal cords, but she'd forgotten how to speak. He bent down and told her to repeat after him. He exaggerated the mouth movements slowly, shaping the word master. She watched closely but couldn't find the words to say anything. The boy was ruthless. She wondered how someone could be so painfully slow. She gave it another shot, but only a tiny squeak escaped her lips. He covered his face, realizing there was no saving her. He turned away, telling her to just get some sleep already. But after crawling back under her blanket, she kept at it, practicing the moves he showed her over and over until she was about to nod off. For the very first time, she whispered, Master. In the middle of the battle, she called out for her master. Lucille just scoffed, dismissing her pleas as useless. To him, she was nothing but a failure. And now, it was her turn to be devoured. Then, suddenly, Lucille's collar activated and she collapsed onto the floor. A thermal shock surged through her body, paralyzing her. She shouted for Iso. He was obviously the one who hit the button. Clearing his throat casually, Iso admitted Cheese was right. Losing the implants they implanted in her would be way too risky. She immediately asked if he had pressed it just because his creation called him master. He scoffed, Of course not. I'd never do something like that. Na was planning to retrieve this useless tool. She wanted to follow, but Iso stopped her. No need. The fallen final disaster just lay there motionless. Then, all of a sudden, a cloaked figure appeared. She turned her head and called out, "Master." But Isab shut her down instantly. "Stop calling me that," he said with a scowl. "You don't deserve the title." He was cold, but at the same time, he lifted her into his arms and carried her away. She kept repeating, "Master." But he told her to stay quiet as he prepared to take her into confinement. As he walked past Lucille, she asked why. In all past experiments, he'd sent her into battle. He never interfered when things got critical. So why save this girl who was weaker in every way physically, fighting skills, or smarts? Ezo explained it was because she had multiple transplanted organs, and if she were devoured, the experiment couldn't move forward. Lucille shrugged, saying then there was no problem. Meanwhile, Cheese was flipping through some top-tier reading material, wondering why Isizo kept up with these little theatrics, while also noting that the White Queen had some seriously impressive qualities. Suddenly, something weird happened. Lucille's body temperature started dropping rapidly. The alarm blared, and Cheese jumped in surprise. Iso was about to leave when Cheese messaged him to get out immediately. Our guy asked why he was panicking so much, and Cheese warned that Lucille's suppression collar had broken. He froze and spun around. It was too late, she was right there. Lucille sighed. What a pity. This time, the collar wasn't going to work. A smart alchemist like him should know viruses can adapt over time. For over 1,000 days, she'd been triggering its effect repeatedly. And just in the last week, the plague viruses inside her adapted to the cold, finding a way to resist it. Ezo tried to keep his cool. He knew better than to provoke her any further. So he told Lucille she won, and he would keep his promise. But she just laughed and said a day with her wasn't nearly enough anymore. He took off his mask, and she looked at him with a curious gaze. Gently placing her hand on his cheek, the virus started to spread throughout his body. Strangely, even though this kid was teetering on the edge of death, his face began to flush a bright red. Lucille was absolutely thrilled, exclaiming she could finally understand everything his cells were doing. Cheese, staring at the screen, was freaking out, but Lucille told him to chill. She had injected the virus, but it was still dormant. She didn't want to hurt her little Isizo just yet. The virus crept toward his mouth, and suddenly, she noticed something odd. The Black Plague virus had run into some kind of resistance. At that moment, Lucille's anger boiled over. She immediately understood the situation. Grabbing the blonde's face, she demanded how he'd have the nerve to kiss her eyes. She knew there was no use lying, her cells could recognize everything. Once again, her virus began to aggressively invade the entire body of the final disaster. She hoisted her up high, declaring this couldn't be forgiven. She would infect every single cell and make sure she suffered the worst fate imaginable. As the unfortunate final disaster writhed in pain, Ezo was completely clueless on how to get out of this mess. Lucille had total mastery over her body and cells, making her immune to any weapon. The freezing collar was the only thing that worked, and now that it was gone, he had no clue what to do next. He still had the void substance, but it was experimental, and using it could blow up the entire base. Watching her crush his experiment, he wondered if he was really out of options. Just then, Cheese chimed in that he had an idea, and I quickly asked him what it was. The little rat explained that Lucille was obsessively fixated on him, and that was the only way to stop her. Meanwhile, Lucille muttered, puzzled why she couldn't invade the brain or heart, but she'd consume everything else. That's when Iso, called out, aiming the slime transformer at myself and declaring this my final warning. The monster scoffed, asking if she was seriously threatened by that fool. He replied that the girl wasn't the point. It was the parts he transplanted inside her. Without those, he couldn't conquer the world or bring back the Pravid family's legacy, which was his whole reason for living. She murmured to herself, admiring his acting skills. Surprisingly, Lucille seemed to buy it. Iso was stunned at how quickly she gave in. Maybe this was the way to control her, even if it felt humiliating. Still, she kept devouring the final disaster, promising that after finishing her off, she would help him conquer the world anyway. The virus kept spreading, and Isaiah realized he had no choice but to pull out his trump card. She smirked, saying it seemed like he'd just been stalling because he'd had a backup plan all along. The truth was, that trump card was pretty embarrassing, and he really didn't want to use it. So, he leaned in and told Lucille that if she spared the girl, he'd sleep holding her in his arms for the next few nights. She immediately froze, eyes wide with surprise. She stepped closer, asking if that was actually true. In her mind, she was already daydreaming about how amazing that would be. Iso could tell from her reaction she was imagining way too much. So, he asked if she agreed. She hummed thoughtfully, then said maybe, just maybe, she could forgive that worthless idiot. But she laid out 2 conditions. He asked what they were, and she flashed a sly grin. The first was that she'd be freed from her cage, with the girl taking her place locked up forever. Iso figured he'd find another way to keep her in check later, but for now, he went along with it. Then she got to the second condition. She began pulling the virus out and ordered the trash girl to wake up. She said, "Watch closely, because she's about to do something." She grabbed Iso's face, complaining that she was furious the darn girl had snatched his first kiss. He already guessed what was coming and tried to explain that the final disaster probably didn't understand any of this, but it was too late. Lucille had already launched her attack. The final disaster, of course, noticed what was going on and started wondering why her chest was aching so much. Our guy couldn't break free, and Lucille was relentless, going all out with her full-on assault. He kept struggling against that stubborn woman who wouldn't budge while Cheese murmured that as a friend, he was kind of glad. Or maybe he was a little sad. He wasn't sure how to feel. The torture finally stopped, and Lucille stood there looking completely satisfied. She quipped that he was still using the same lavender-flavored toothpaste as before. Meanwhile, Iso was frantically spraying his mouth, but Lucille just smiled, saying it was pointless. Her cells had already taken over his body. As he crumpled to the ground, the final disaster kept feeling that weird pain. She couldn't wrap her head around what was going on. Meanwhile, the virus coursed through her blood until suddenly her red blood cells spotted the virus and launched an attack. Whistle turned around only to see that the girl had been cleansed in no time. She started to say something about how impossible this was, but before she could finish, she got grabbed by the neck and lifted off the ground. The girl's arm morphed, and both alchemists immediately recognized it, the arm of the Ashen Angel. The final disaster began to speak, saying she hated something, but it was unclear what, since she still couldn't talk properly. Meanwhile, Lucille was burning up. The scene then cut to a man standing alone in a barren wasteland. He muttered that the creature had already drained all the fluids and poisons he'd given her, so why wasn't she passing out? She readied an attack and launched it at him. He just ducked his head, saying it didn't matter. Katja had gotten away from the island, and that was enough. But then, out of nowhere, a towering woman with purple hair appeared, telling him to stop throwing himself away without asking first. A barrier appeared, blocking the attack, and he called her name. The blow was stopped, and a moment later she cupped his face and told him. From now on, he wasn't allowed to ditch her like that. He leaned in, about to kiss her, but instead, he got stomped right in the face. The woman coldly said the kiss scene was getting cut because she didn't want to see his nasty tongue. Apparently, this whole thing was being filmed as a movie, and if you're confused, I'm right there with you. I'm just going with the flow, and it looks like this is part of the story, so we're not totally lost. It turns out the phoenix in the scene was actually real. They were even feeding her shells to munch on. And all of this was happening in Gordon City, on the set of a movie starring the White Queen, which, if I'm remembering right, was the same story our rat boy was reading earlier. The White Queen wasn't just the second top hero in the Golden City, she was also the most renowned actress worldwide. The poor guy acting in the movie was frozen in place, and the woman beside him apologized, saying he was the only actor they could find. But the White Queen sneered, claiming this guy was nothing compared to her actual favorite. His acting was awful, robotic, lifeless, and totally lacking emotion. The assistant nervously admitted they knew he couldn't meet her standards, but after auditioning over 2,000 people, their budget was totally drained. The Queen just shrugged it off, saying it didn't really matter. They could always pull $200 million from her bank account. Then someone ran up with urgent news. She asked, "What's going on? What's this about someone robbing my bank? We all know exactly who did it." A woman reported that the criminals used some kind of gas device. One was an ordinary human, and the other looked like a rat. She showed the gadget, and the moment the White Queen saw it, she recognized the symbol immediately. The masked woman added that even Homer, an incredibly skilled officer, had been turned into slime by some mysterious weapon. Just as she was about to suggest calling for backup, the White Queen cut her off, ordering no one to interfere. The masked woman protested, saying it would be impossible to handle alone since that area was known as the hero's execution zone. But the Queen started to transform. Her hair turned pure white, and her eyes shone with an unearthly glow. She stepped forward, declaring that the so-called hero's execution zone meant nothing to her, or to those criminals. They seemed to hold the answers she'd been desperately searching for all this time. She commanded her team to drop everything and hunt those criminals down as fast as possible. Meanwhile, the actress on set hesitated, asking, "What about the movie?" The White Queen simply replied, "Cancel everything for now." She turned to leave but then suddenly paused. She'd almost forgotten about the poor guy. She walked over and asked him, "Do you really want to kiss me?" He stammered, trying to apologize, but she conjured a massive ice block and stuffed it into his mouth. She watched him squirm for a moment, then said he was lucky she let it slide this time. As she walked away, she coolly declared, "No one in this world is allowed to touch my lips." The scene changed. A fallen bucket on the floor gave a glimpse into someone's past. A woman sternly told a little girl she wasn't allowed to play until she finished cleaning the floor. The child clutched a teddy bear, one that looked strikingly similar to the one the final disaster also owned. The woman snatched the bear from her hands and stomped on it. The girl begged, "Aunt Jammin, please don't." But it was the man beside her who got slapped. The man who appeared to be the White Queen's father grabbed her, telling Jim not to treat the girl that way. But Jim reminded him that it was her who pulled them off the streets. She was the one who made sure they didn't starve. The father, called Mailer, didn't respond. Suddenly, a man appeared behind Jim and asked if this was the family supplying children to be soldiers. She smiled and said yes, but the offering was this particular girl. The father, however, was terrified, demanding to know who this man was and why he barged in without knocking. The mysterious man said that Ming Quan didn't need anyone's permission to enter any location in this kingdom. The father recoiled at the mention of that name and glanced at Jim, wondering what she was thinking. She replied that it was clear she was just making sure this child had a safe and secure home. This girl would be taken by the organization and trained from an early age to become a soldier. The man stepped forward and asked if this was the girl. Jim told him not to be fooled. She was young, but incredibly tough. She could even go 3 days without eating. The man studied her closely, clearly appreciating the fierce determination in her eyes. He declared she would be taken, and before you knew it, he was already walking away with her. Ah, now it makes sense. This was actually the backstory of the ultimate disaster. Huh. And now, we're back to the present. She was in the room, staring at a piece of that story. Meanwhile, the alchemists were examining a rabbit that was mysteriously losing a ton of fur from its chest, totally baffled about why. She asked how the disaster was doing, and the reply was that, at the very least, her vital signs were stable. Flashback to a few years earlier. A girl was using healing magic, channeling energy into the leader of the underworld hounds, known as the Hunting Master. The man from the earlier story, Doberman, introduced himself to the master, who immediately asked about the assassination. Doberman listed off several ally names, explaining that all of them had died. The Hunting Master couldn't believe it. How could so many attempts have failed at killing the traitors of the Loma dynasty? Doberman clarified that everyone had indeed died except for Yorkshire. Yorkshire had disappeared. Apparently, everyone had dog names. The master was visibly shaken and looked worn out. Back in the present, Iso was pacing in the room. Suddenly, he shouted he had an idea, while Cheese groaned, asking him to stop yelling so much. Iso declared that he was tired of calling her final disaster. She needed a code name, and from now on, it would be Alpina. He asked if Cheese wanted to know why he chose that name, but the rat just told him to get to the point. Iso recalled that his master once said Alpina was her favorite flower. It symbolized young women. However, Iso told Cheese that he wasn't going to explain the meaning behind the name. With that settled, the two of them celebrated. She had officially become an extremely dangerous experiment. Iso commented that her greatest strength was her gentle personality, but her biggest problem was how unstable her powers were. Their first mission was to figure out how she activated her arm. The first time happened when she was scared of sleeping alone in the cage. Cheese immediately claimed the solution was obvious. She activated her power whenever she wanted to sleep next to Iso. Iso ignored that and said the second time was when he crouched down, which she must have read as him being attacked by Lucille. That's when she unleashed the thermal pressure vaporization cannon. Cheese quickly interrupted, asking since when did it get such a ridiculous name. Iso proudly said it had that name from the moment she obliterated Lucille, and he thought it sounded awesome. Cheese totally disagreed. Iso then pointed out the coolest thing about the attack: it nearly reached the sun's temperature, even vaporizing the Black Plague virus completely. She mentioned that if Lucille hadn't been wearing the ice collar, she definitely would have perished. At that moment, Lucille was still underwater, recovering from her injuries. Suddenly, Alpina's stomach let out a loud rumble. Iso glanced over, and she looked absolutely famished. Then she pointed to herself and said, "Hungry master." Somehow, she just suddenly learned to talk out of nowhere. Someone asked why they had never seen Iso feeding her before. Iso explained that he always figured a creature destined to bring about the ultimate catastrophe wouldn't need something as basic as food, but there was no need to worry. They had plenty of meals packed with high nutrition and energy. Later on, Cheese stared in disbelief, asking if Iso seriously made that meal for her. But Iso confidently said, "Yep, it's spot on." The poor wild dragon, who had been snoozing peacefully, was about to become dinner. The dragon woke up braggy, asking what those two were up to. Then his face suddenly brightened, saying he was desperate to break free from the restrictive gear he was wearing. Iso smiled and told him he'd definitely get a chance to make things right. The dragon got all excited until Iso finished his sentence, saying he was about to become the girl's next meal. The dragon's expression instantly changed. She protested, saying the Storm Malice dragon was the only real dragon among them, and it would be a huge waste to just toss him away like that. But Iso wasn't convinced. He believed that if Alpina ate him, she'd transform into a new form. He ordered her to eat him whole. She repeated his command and suddenly found herself perched on the dragon's horns. The poor dragon cried out desperately, begging for his life and swearing never to badmouth the boss again, but Iso coldly replied, "Too late." Alpina prepared herself and bit down on the horn, but, of course, she just ended up hurting her own mouth like a goof. Clear's throat. A little while later, there were boiling instant noodles instead, so that's what she decided to eat. 3 minutes later, Alpina's eyes were glowing with delight. Our guy handed her the chopsticks and immediately asked what the wild girl was doing. Obviously, she was just eating with her hands like she didn't have a care. He warned her to be careful since the noodles were hot. Meanwhile, Cheese wondered if she genuinely didn't know how to use chopsticks or if she was just that ravenous. However, Alpina kept eating until she suddenly paused for a moment, teared up, and said it was delicious. As usual, Iso was as blunt as ever, telling her to stop crying over instant noodles because it was embarrassing. Cheese, on the other hand, understood that she probably hadn't had many tasty meals in her life. The protagonist then shared that it reminded him of his friend, who, being a rat, used to sneak into this place to steal cheese until he got caught and almost got shot, but Cheese told him to shut up, saying she heard the protagonist begged for milk until he was 3 years old. Iso threw his chopstick at his friend, blaming it on his mom for telling him there was something magical inside the box. The two started brawling, things flying everywhere. Meanwhile, Alpina ate peacefully. Our guy called the rat a filthy thief, but Cheese shot back that stealing cheese wasn't an insult for a rat, it was actually a compliment. With that, she finally finished eating, handed the bowl back to our guy, and said it was delicious. He then gently wiped her mouth. She joked about how ridiculous it was that she got so messy just from eating something simple like that, but her stomach was still growling like a beast. Not long after, there were heaps of instant noodles all around, and she was still chowing down like there was no tomorrow. Though, on the bright side, she finally figured out how to use chopsticks. She wiped her mouth again, then handed her bowl over to Iso. Iso told Chess to whip up another batch, but sadly, Chess had to break the bad news that was the very last one left. An hour later, Iso was practically begging her to back off. It was his last box of chocolate, and he pleaded for a little mercy. Meanwhile, he couldn't figure out why she was acting so wild over chocolate when she'd been totally chill with the instant noodles. The girl crawled toward him like some kind of hungry monster, eyes wide with a desperate, pleading look, begging for more of that sweet treat. Seeing himself cornered, Iso gave in, popped open the wafers, and started munching. His mouth was full, but man, she was on a mission to swipe some. Poor guy was left with no other choice. Now, you might be thinking she's going way too far common. Let the guy enjoy his wafers in peace. But a little while later, there he was, sprawled on the floor, completely wiped out. Yet, the hunger monster wasn't done with her yet. Right then, Chess got nervous. He was standing guard by his cheese shelf, ready to defend it with everything he had. It was his prized secret stash he'd spent years building up. But Alpinea just crouched down, sniffed the air, put a hand down, and activated her angel arm. The moment the big rat looked up, the ceiling itself began to melt away. He jumped back, shouting that they were doomed. That's when she made her move. As soon as she was standing, the rat pointed his weapon at her and warned that stealing Iso's sweets was one thing, but this cheese was sacred ground. Yet, in just a flash, she was right up close with her angel arm, barely touching the weapon before yanking it away. The poor guy had zero chance to hold on, the heat was scorching his tiny hands. By the time he looked up, the whole weapon had completely melted into nothing. He crumpled to the floor, realizing this might be the end. She grabbed the first box and dove into his cheese stash. Seconds later, all the cheese boxes were empty on the floor. Meanwhile, the big rat just lay there, declaring this was, without a doubt, the final disaster. Over in the monster prison, the Abyssal Eye asked the dragon if he was alright. They'd heard he was supposed to be fed to the disaster. But the dragon explained they gave up on that plan, since he was one tough dragon with a super-resistant body. He was about to show off his strongest feature, his horn, but right then, it shattered completely. He cried out in despair, lamenting that his most majestic part was gone. Later on, the final disaster was back, locked up exactly where she had been created. Iso explained that after countless tests, it was confirmed she had zero resistance to sweets, especially chocolate. The moment she tasted a bit, she'd go into a wild hunger frenzy, destroying everything, even unleashing her angel arm. Then he turned to his friend and asked why he wasn't saying a word. The big rat foamed at the mouth, revealing she had devoured 400 blocks of the rarest, priciest cheese ever known. His vintage collection was over 140 years old, and that's exactly why this twisted experiment deserved the harshest punishment possible. He grabbed a saw and boasted he'd start by chopping her up into at least 1,200 pieces. Ezo just shrugged and said she was still adorable. Then the rat swore he'd wash her eyes with the two coldest liquids they had. Yet again, Aso insisted she was still cute, but the rat argued she deserved a sting from the brain-sucking mosquito. Iso chimed back in, saying she was cute once more. Finally, the rat declared she needed a few smacks to learn her lesson. Even though I kept saying she was cute, he secretly thought she really needed some punishment. Otherwise, they'd never get to enjoy any more tasty meals here. Later, he asked if she was ready for a harsh punishment from a ruthless alchemist. Honestly, I was expecting something a lot more scientific. He figured with her childish nature, the best punishment was just good old-fashioned pain. Without hesitation, he landed the first hit, and the poor girl cried out in pain. While she was getting mercilessly hit, he told her it was for being greedy, eating all the chocolate and cheese. Sometime later, the girl got really sucked in and was now crying desperately. Iso told Chess this would teach her not to make the same mistake again. The rat agreed, but pointed out the real issue was that the base was now out of all snacks except for some experimental food. The protagonist's stomach growled in agreement, saying they hadn't even had dinner yet. Then she got hit again. The rat then brought up another major problem. When they went out to buy stuff or do errands, could they really just leave her alone back at the base? Iso said that wasn't possible since she'd wreck everything while they were gone. Looking down at the poor girl, he sighed, admitting he had no choice but to take her along. Later on, he slipped on his vest while the rat buckled his belt. He adjusted the buckle, threw on his cape, packed his poisons, and it was go time for the food hunt. Meanwhile, Alpenia just stood there staring at the two of them. They showed her how to raise her arm and strike some cool poses for the next time something like this came up. Then Iso commanded the activation of the Matrix teleportation, heading straight to the Beacon District. Man, that teleportation circle was huge, and the three were right in the center of it. She grabbed Iso's hand, making him wonder just how weird it was or how much her mood swung. With that, Chess started counting to 3 and covered her eyes. The teleportation kicked in, and an alchemy circle appeared somewhere else in the city. Then our guy emerged, spreading his arms wide and welcoming them to crime paradise, the Golden City. They stood atop the city's lighthouse near one of the 32 teleport spots. So said that out of all the places, this one was still his favorite because he could see everything from up high. Disaster took a look around, clearly impressed. Meanwhile, the big rat asked if they were headed straight to the mega store, but the boy said they'd stop by a clothing shop first because the girl looked a little out of place. They planned to walk down Camilla Avenue, where they were sure to find something perfect for her. The rat, however, pointed out that place only had overpriced clothes, and on top of that, their funds were already running low. She pointed out that the place only stocked pricey clothes, and on top of that, their bank funds were almost depleted. Iso replied that this was actually the perfect chance to scope out their next big heist. He told the girl to grab his hand, and the moment she did, he leapt off the lighthouse with her. Mid-fall, he activated his anti-gravity alchemy. The glowing symbol on his neck lit up, and she slowly blinked open her eyes, realizing they were floating. Our guy took the lead while the big rat grumbled that once they landed, he definitely wanted at least one hot dog. The scene shifted to a neighborhood called Amberlight. In the center of a fountain stood a golden statue of a woman. The alchemy girl was mesmerized, while Iso wondered why the rat was taking forever just to buy a hot dog. Then, he noticed a little boy in front of him, saying his little sister was climbing way up high. Our guy chuckled, thinking there was no way that was happening. There were way too many patrolling folks around for that to be real. That's when he caught the boy, say little sister. He glanced sideways, and sure enough, she was scaling the statue from below. He shouted for her to get down right away, but instead, she perched herself on the statue's head, waving at her master. Meanwhile, the rat was arguing with a hot dog vendor, complaining he told the guy 1,000 times not to put anything sour on his hot dog. He took a bite, then happily declared, "Finally got the perfect flavor, after all that." Then he thought of Iso. Just then, 2 cops strolled by, pointing up. Seeing the crowd gathering at the statue, he wondered how it was possible to disappear for just 10 seconds and have all this chaos happen. One officer grabbed a megaphone, announcing that the Camilla statue was super important and the girl needed to come down immediately. But she just shook her head firmly, signaling, nope. The rat knew climbing that statue without permission was a major crime in the City of Heroes. Putting on his sunglasses, he realized he had to move fast. First, he planned to bolt and ditch his crew, because that's how a villain survives. Meanwhile, Iso tossed a flashbang into the air, which exploded right in front of the statue and everyone nearby. As he did, he muttered that he'd never drag that woman out of the lab again. The cops were quickly knocked out by the big rat, who wielded a knife with his tail. He told Iso to grab the girl because now he was going to put on a hero act, but our guy saw right through it, saying he knew the rat had just tried to make a solo escape. One cop started waking up, but as soon as he tried to get up, he stumbled over his own uniform and face-planted back down. Apparently, the trio had slipped away with the girl and were already across town. Still, our guy was wiped out, saying this scheme was going to get them all killed one of these days. Then, someone nearby snapped at them to get their grubby hands off and move away from the shop. An employee said the Golden Legacy was way too important to be sullied by people like them. But Iso asked Chess what the plan was for this guy complaining about their dirtiness. The rat just started licking himself, clearly amused by the whole thing. That's when the shopkeeper threatened to find someone to deal with the two of them, until Chess stuck a mango on his saliva and the guy freaked out. He kept trying to make change, but Iso asked what they planned to do now since the money they owed for the mess was all stuck together. The instant the guy switched gears, he brushed off the small cell level as nothing, given the caliber of customers they had. He cheerfully said about grifting the money with zero effort. Meanwhile, Iso waved him a casual goodbye from inside. Shortly after, he asked the young master what kind of clothes he had in mind. The young man said it wasn't for himself but for a lady. The seller, sensing a challenge, asked what a distinguished young lady like her was after. She turned back, playfully poking the mannequin's nose, and chuckled. The guy was totally floored by her beauty. He thought to himself he'd never seen anyone that flawless. He hadn't quite caught it when she was outside, but now it hit him she was truly one of a kind. Watching Iso boss her around, he started to think that this poor goddess was basically shackled by that weirdo. That's when Iso ordered him to fetch the finest dresses they had. Pronto. She was going to try them all on, one after another. So, the women brought out a whole stack, whisking the girl away while she called for her master. He just reminded her not to make a scene, it was just a quick outfit change. He took a seat, and the guy offered him some tea, but our boy wasn't feeling it. Instead, he called for the scruffy guy nearby and told him to hand over the soda he'd been hiding. Chess passed it over, but grumbled about the nagging since he was busy hunting for a cool hat. 20 minutes rolled by, and Iso was starting to wonder what was taking so long. One of the women called out for help, she said. Dressing this girl wasn't exactly a walk in the park. When he peeked behind the curtain, she was trembling. He told her to cut the drama since he was right outside the door. With that, the women kept helping her while she kept shouting for her master, and from outside he kept answering, "I'm right here." She called him again, and again he reassured her he was there. One more time, same story, he was definitely right there. Then she emerged in a stunning crimson evening gown that was priced at $159,000. Iso thought quietly that she actually rocked that dress. Meanwhile, the shopkeeper asked what he thought, claiming it was ultra-exclusive. The guy said his girlfriend deserved nothing less, but Iso quickly corrected him, pointing out she wasn't his girlfriend but his servant. If he made that mistake again, he'd have his tongue cut out. The seller was stunned, buying something that pricey for a servant. This guy had to be insanely loaded. But then Iso said this dress barely cut it for him. They needed something better. The seller hushed his worries. "The richest folks in the city shop here," she said. Then the girl appeared wearing the sacred bloom dress, priced at $300,000. Iso admitted it was pretty but felt it lacked the right dignity. He instructed them to bring out something else. Next up was the Golden Emperor's gown, priced at $340,000. Man, the prices were climbing fast. Iso was momentarily speechless, while the seller called to the young master. He explained this dress was originally made for the Empress herself, so it had to be just right for him. But right then, a Batman-style limo rolled up to the front of the store. The staff unfurled a red carpet, and suddenly the shopkeeper looked rattled, admitting he'd completely forgotten about today's VIP guest. He told the three of them to hide quietly or things would get ugly fast. Then the door swung open, and, unveiling a girl scene by scene, she wore traditional Japanese attire, flanked by two demons. From the H-High family, this was Rei, though her lack of sandals made her seem rather poor. The moment she set foot on the ground, she turned to Akinen and mentioned her feet felt cold. The demon woman quickly apologized and promised to fix it. She summoned a flame attack, sending a burst of fire from the store. Meanwhile, the other servants were still busy rolling out the carpet. When she stepped inside the shop, the vendor greeted her as Le Cora. "I thought her name was Renee." "Well, guess we'll find out soon enough." She simply said she heard the gothic Lolita dress was on sale there and wanted to see it. Meanwhile, behind the curtain, the three watched silently. Chess immediately noticed that based on her name, the girl belonged to the Cora family, which was a big deal. Iso knew this was one of the most prestigious families in the city. Meanwhile, disaster was nowhere to be seen. What puzzled our guy was that a family this noble rarely left the Golden District. So what were they doing here? The carpet was still being stretched out when the shopkeeper told her to follow him to something covered with a cloth. He said this was exactly what she was looking for. But when he turned to glance back, she had stopped right there. The carpet ran out, and the servants apologized. Akathu immediately lost it, demanding to know how they could be so careless as to run out of golden carpet. She declared this a grave mistake for the servants of the Cora family and admitted she had no clue what to do about it. Man, that guy was sweating like crazy. He even drew his sword, looking ready to end their misery. The two servants screamed that they'd offer their hearts in sacrifice. But before they could move, their blades crumbled to dust. Another servant, named Shinku, had activated the Buddha's forgiveness technique. One servant thanked him, only to be stabbed in the back moments later, both collapsing in agony. They lay there still, as Shink commanded her to carry on peacefully. Seriously, was all of that necessary? The girl casually stepped over them like stepping stones. Chess even wondered aloud if every noble in the center was this full of themselves. But Iso smiled, saying this was actually a golden opportunity. His friend asked what he meant, and Iso answered it was the perfect chance for a kidnapping, someone who was supposed to be tucked away safely in the Golden Zone. The rat, however, argued that killing heroes sounded way less risky than snatching a member of one of the most powerful families. Iso wasn't fazed, insisting this was how they'd reclaim the glory the Perserad family had lost. But Chess remained scared, pointing out that the whole city was built by families like these, so no doubt they'd hunt them down until their last breath. Meanwhile, Renee kept walking over her fallen servants until she stood right in front of a dress. The shopkeeper said he was about to reveal a true masterpiece and pulled off the cover cloth. Just then, Iso teased his friend, saying he was turning into a scaredy cat. That's when they heard a scream. The so-called gothic Lolita dress was completely shredded, or maybe it was just a very unusual design. The shopkeeper slumped to the floor as Renee demanded to know if this dress was truly the one those magical scissors had crafted for her. Aketingu had already unsheathed her blade, and Shinku warned that not even Buddha himself could save them this time. Iso turned to his buddy and asked if he was behind all this. Chess apologized, admitting the shopkeeper had been seriously annoying, so he figured he'd have a little fun with something that looked pricey. Meanwhile, Alpina was trying to say she wanted to see what was happening too, but since she wasn't used to walking in heels, she tripped and accidentally shoved our guy forward. At that exact moment, Renee stood right in front of the shopkeeper, demanding he confess who was responsible. Just then, our guy stumbled out of the changing room. The shopkeeper immediately blamed himself. Chess knew they were in deep trouble this time. Aketingu grabbed Iso by his tie without hesitation, hoisting him up and asking if he was the culprit. Our guy pulled something from his sleeve and didn't hesitate to admit, yeah, it was me. She was caught off guard by his honesty, while Chess couldn't figure out why he confessed so quickly. Even the shopkeeper looked confused, muttering that this lunatic was beyond saving now. Aang said she didn't like how he was staring at her and was about to poke his eye out, but Renee stepped in, telling her to stop. She suddenly declared she actually loved that dress. Both the shopkeeper and the big rat jumped in surprise, wondering if this girl was nuts. Aketingu argued, saying the boy ruined her dress, so he deserved to lose a finger. But Renee simply asked if she needed to repeat herself. Akinu quickly obeyed, letting go of our guy but smacking him across the face, warning him to behave. As she straightened his tie, Iso thought to himself how cool it would be if the headlines tomorrow claimed this woman had been kidnapped. He couldn't decide whether to go with the dragon grenade or the torment grenade. Suddenly, Renee smiled, saying she knew exactly who he was and what he was up to. From the moment she stepped into the store, she had felt this intense sense of danger. Iso was baffled and surprised. Chess wondered if his presence had really been noticed so fast. Renee slowly stepped forward, keeping her feet planted on the carpet, and stopped right in front of him. Then she revealed she knew he was just a lowly intern at this shop. After hearing she was coming, he tweaked the dress and staged this whole theatrical mess just to get her attention. She was convinced it was all because he wanted to be part of the Korra family. Iso was totally lost. He had no clue what this crazy girl was talking about. But Renee pressed on, admiring his guts for risking everything just to catch her eye. That's why, if he dropped to his knees and kissed her foot, she'd accept him as her servant. Aketingu was livid. Well, not exactly mad, more jealous of the chance the boy just landed. Meanwhile, with a smile, Renee thought to herself that if he got down there looking too eager, she wasn't sure if she should stomp on his head or just give him a kick. But Iso covered his nose and declared he'd never kiss a gross foot. Both Chess and the shopkeeper were left speechless. Angu wasn't quite sure if she should just lose it and rip his head off. Meanwhile, the main guy just rolled his eyes, calling it absurd that someone from such a wealthy family couldn't even afford shoes to walk around in. There was no way he was kissing something that grubby. Chess was freaking out, terrified this lunatic would keep pouring gasoline on the fire. Renee held herself back, but then suddenly burst into tears. She whimpered that she put perfume on her feet every day to keep them from smelling bad. She raised her hand to slap him, and he already had a plan lined up. The instant her hand swung, he'd pull a grenade from his pocket, toss it in the room, and kick off the kidnapping chaos. But before any of that went down, someone popped out from behind the curtains. Our dear Alpina grabbed Renee's wrist. Chess was stunned. He had no clue how she'd moved that fast. In the blink of an eye, a flying Slash King landed right beside Alpina. Akatangu was ordering her to take her filthy hand off the lady. Ezo realized things were seriously about to get messy. Disaster just stood there quietly while Renee seemed to be admiring her. She told Akeningu to put her weapon down. Akinu asked why. Renee said she was sure the girl wasn't attacking her but protecting the boy. Izuto was impressed with how calm Renee was. Then she added that she really liked that girl and wanted to take her with her. Akath didn't recall the boss having tastes like that and wondered what kind of books she'd been reading lately. Meanwhile, the shopkeeper had zero clue what was going on today. But Rain was getting seriously fed up. She thought these two were being outrageously arrogant. Meanwhile, Disaster just stood there, completely clueless about the whole situation. Then the girl said that judging by the blonde's outfit, she obviously belonged to the nobility. But still, when Renee set her sights on something, she never gave up. So she straightforwardly asked for the price. Of course, Elpino was still totally lost. That's when I chimed in, saying she should be the one setting the price. Renee asked what I meant by that, and at that moment, I reached into my pocket. Then I declared that from this point forward, she had officially been kidnapped by the #1 villain of Golden City. Anger tried to draw her sword, but it was too late. The purple poison was already on the floor. The swordswoman and the servant lost their strength instantly, and in the blink of an eye, the girl was gone. Now, tied to a chair, Ezo smirked and asked, "Where's the like button for this?" And you guys remember how last chapter dropped right in the middle of that battle at the clothing shop? The protagonist suddenly warned everyone that the clueless girl was now being kidnapped. He threw on his mask. Akatenu sprang forward, telling the lady to step back, but he scattered poison on the floor, and everyone dropped to their knees. Shinku tried to stand up, but all his strength was gone, and in just seconds, everyone in the store vanished. Under the moonlight, Renee lay unconscious, being carried off by Chess, who asked if he realized the countdown to their deaths had just started. This kidnapping was pure madness, but carrying the stunning Alpina made it worth it. He said the gas he released warped people's memories, so the Verors are probably struggling right now just to remember what they even did. Back at the shop, Shinku's asking where that white-haired kid disappeared to. Hakatanga tells him to snap out of it. It turned out to be some chubby guy with freckles all over his face. Obviously, neither of them has any idea who the real person was. Meanwhile, back with the group, Rini is waking up tied to a chair with a gag stuffed in her mouth. He says, "Welcome to the most dangerous hideout in this city, the old mansion of the legendary Perserad family." Out of nowhere, Alpina shows up behind him, chuckling like a true villain. Our hero tells her to hide again, reminding her she's not allowed to show up without permission. Meanwhile, Rain wiggles her tongue to loosen the gag and says, "It's kind of hilarious how they call themselves villains when they can't even tie a proper gag." She points out that the Dan girl just woke up and is already throwing shade. Isizo explains he only tied her hands and feet, not the gag. So yeah, that's on Cheese. Both of them jump when they realize she's completely free. The protagonist glares at Cheese and scolds him. "You moron, don't you even know how to tie a knot?" Suddenly, they notice she's vanished from the chair. That sneaky girl already grabbed a bag of chips and is casually munching at the table while Alpina is about to swipe all the snacks. Out of the blue, Iso points a gun at her head and warns she better remember she's a hostage in this place. If she disobeys, she'll get a taste of his alchemy's wrath. But Rennie says there's nothing in alchemy scarier than the Koya family's punishments. He challenges her to name one. So, she says they dig a grave, trap you inside, then start laying metal plates on top. At first, you don't feel a thing, but as they stack up, you start getting crushed bit by bit. Man, that's cruel. Another torture was the Hat of Agony, where they'd fit an unbearably hot steel helmet on your head. Geez, that family's savage too. And it only gets nastier, she says. One of the worst is the nest of 12 centipedes, where they dig 12 holes, put a centipede in each, and let them lay eggs inside you. Holy crap, that's seriously horrifying. Cheese nervously asks if, hypothetically, if she was let go right now, that wouldn't happen to them, right? Of course. Isizo refuses to release her, asking if Cheese lost his mind. The rat-faced guy insists that's why he said, hypothetically, those traps don't sound like a walk in the park. Rennie then tells him that none of those punishments would be used on people like them, and he relaxes until she adds that's only because those were the mild ones. Kidnapping someone like her would mean facing consequences way worse. Naturally, Cheese is freaking out now, but she tells them to chill. She'll make sure her family doesn't come after them. More than that, she won't even mention she was kidnapped, and she'll throw a ridiculous amount of money their way if they agree to only one condition. Why on earth is this woman trying to strike a deal with them? Still, Cheese is shaking but curious. She says the condition is she wants to join their group. Both are puzzled, and she explains that life with her family is just plain boring. So she wants to join them, pull off some crimes, and have fun. On top of that, she's curious about whoever created weapons strong enough to take down Shinku and Akatango. Seeing their potential, she wants to be their sponsor. She's shocked to realize she has the highest ranking card in the city, the Protagonist, but she knows there's gotta be more tricks up her sleeve. And yep, here comes this oddball again. Figures. Get lost, weirdo. She stands up, waving her card right in his face, saying he's gotta follow every single command she gives. Iso clearly refuses, but she suddenly shoves him aside, yelling that they're totally in on the deal. They need the cash, and anyway, Iso will obey. Today's shaping up to be a good one. The main guy snaps back. Yeah, right, like I ever agreed to that. But Cheese shouts, "You dummy, Are you even listening? We seriously need that money to build the scariest weapon ever. The protagonist straightens his jacket and declares, as the head of the Perserad family, I refuse. Our family doesn't take handouts, assistance, or orders from anyone. Then he commands, give her a dose of dragon spider venom and tie her up again. If nothing happens in a day, we'll demand compensation from the Koya family. But Rennie says it's pointless. The Koya family won't pay a dime for a kidnapping because their honor outweighs any person. The second someone's kidnapped, they're basically out of the family. They never negotiate with kidnappers. They just track them down and use their bodies to show who's boss. She thinks, wow, that's a little harsh, isn't it? Kind of cold. Then Rennie says, okay, I've changed my mind. I'll give you the money, but you have to help me with one thing. I want you to take out the current head of the Koya family, Inju. He double-checks if that's right, and she cuts in, yeah, that's her dad exactly. If he's really the biggest baddie in Golden City, he shouldn't be scared of that. Cut to them, cracking open lobsters, prepping for a big feast. She says she figured the boy would say no to the girl's plan. So what gives? Iso replies that she's asking him to kill her dad, not his own, so he's got no reason to refuse. She tells the kid to pipe down since he doesn't even know who his dad is. Iso says his mom once told him that when he takes over the Perserad family and rules Golden City, he'll find out. She laughs, saying their lady always loves keeping secrets. Still, he's seriously impressed with Rene's generosity. She dropped 20 million coins. That's like robbing 10 banks at once. Meanwhile, somewhere else, armor lies strewn on the floor next to what looks like Shinku's clothes, hat, and all. Hem snorts, they're messing with a Kingu. Don't touch my round. Diamus. She's good for the story. Poor Shink's there too. But if that guy wants him off the planet, fine. Someone's holding a chalice filled with fish and worms, warning that spindle leeches slip through human openings way easier than centipedes. Maybe it's time to step up that kind of punishment. He stands and says, those who can't protect their masters deserve exactly that fate, and she'll be the perfect test case. No way do you do that to my demonsting. She's all fired up, vowing she'll save the lady. The guy says she doesn't even know what the kidnappers look like. How do you even talk about a rescue? Akatingu yells they'll pay with a ritual blade to the heart. Suddenly, Rena shows up, telling her dad, cut it out, she's fine. Weirdly, he drops his cup, comes over all happy, and hugs her, saying he's so relieved Nana's okay. Thank goodness that dad seems oddly decent. There's gotta be something fishy about him. Outside, the artist strikes a perfect pose under the moonlight, looking effortlessly cool. Akitenu, stunning and imposing, approaches to thank them for saving her. Suddenly, Rennie ignores her, pulls out a snack, starts munching, and offers a bite, claiming it's delicious. Akitangu glances over and says, junk food is strictly off-limits in this house. Where did that rule even come from? Renai just warns that if she gave the order to eat it, they better follow without questions. Wow, the artist is like a machine, genuinely impressed. But she's curious how Renai managed to escape from the kidnappers. Renai just smiles and says it's a secret. Meanwhile, Cheese burps, commenting he never realized the Koya family's been training people since they were 5 years old. That's wild. Izuzo adds he's more freaked out by the fact she had 26 blades and 13 needles hidden in her clothes. At any moment inside, they were basically one wrong move away from disaster. They got lucky she didn't make a move. Cheese tells the kid to snap out of it. She's not about to harm the guy she wants as her sugar daddy. However, he says he's not too keen on being anyone's pet. His cooperation is strictly about taking down the Kuroya family, and he wants no further part with that quirky girl. But Cheese tells him to think it over. If they pull this plan off and she ends up leading the family, money worries would be a thing of the past. Plus, he already got his revenge on her before leaving. Oh man, for crying out loud, he's using a fluffy little stick to tickle her foot. I'm honestly a bit scared to see where this is heading. She's clearly suffering, begging him to quit. Meanwhile, our hero explains that the tickling tool is actually custom-made. He can adjust the intensity of how much it tickles. It uses a special kind of insect, and the sensation it triggers is amplified way beyond normal. Wherever it touches becomes pure torture. Good lord. Let's just get back to her place. She's now sitting on her bed, declaring that Izuzo is utterly gross. Meanwhile, across the city, a police officer is trying to make sense of a report about $800,000 going missing. Oh right, it's that guy from the clothing store who says yes, that sum totals up from the exclusive clothes. The officer says he understands, but the description doesn't match the Koya family's report. Their people said it was a chubby guy with freckles and a giant rabbit. The shopkeeper says he can't explain why the Koya family would lie, but he's positive it was a kid with black hair, a bang covering one eye, and a strange half-human rat creature. The officer apologizes, saying unfortunately, he can't accept that kind of testimony. Then a new character enters the scene. A tall woman slams the poor guy against the wall, demanding to know where the boy who lost $800,000 that night is. The cop steps out from behind the door, asking who she is, as she tosses a badge in his face. The badge reads Babapolia, and she announces she's the new chief around here. Good grief. Somebody please explain what that little top she's wearing says. I'm about to ask ChatGPT. It says it means security, but honestly, it doesn't look all that secure to me. The guys don't seem to believe she's really the new chief. She asks if it's because of her looks and tells them to get used to it. She's a high-ranking slacker who's going to be kicking back with her feet on the desk whenever she feels like it. The guys don't seem to buy that she's really the new chief. She asks if it's because of how she looks and tells them to get used to it. She's a top-tier slacker who's going to be lounging with her feet on the desk whenever she feels like it. One of the guys suddenly starts yelling, demanding to know what on earth is going on. She replies that he must be one of those subordinates who needs a little bribe to behave himself. No way. This girl is seriously a cop. Lock her up right now. But she says the bribe means he can touch wherever he wants, as long as he obeys her like a faithful puppy. Poor officer just can't resist. The guy wants to keep his job though, so he quietly closes the door and mutters outside how completely ridiculous this whole thing is. Who in their right mind thought putting that punk girl in charge was a good idea? Then this stubborn guy named Torin, the team captain, asks if he's welcomed the new boss yet. The subordinate snaps, "Boss, you got to be kidding, right? That girl's the new boss? You've lost it." But Torin just says minotaurs don't joke around. Even though the guy wants no part of it, the other workers are already buzzing. One says, "You've got yourself one tasty lollipop." Another asks if he can serve her water all day, while the last one wonders why his job suddenly became so exciting. The guy realizes everyone's interested for all the wrong reasons. He warns them not to underestimate the new chief. Now that I take a closer look, she actually does look kind of cute in this scene. Anyway, this girl is supposed to help crack down on the mysterious gang that's been robbing banks. That Babapolia girl was sent straight from headquarters, so she's got to be powerful. He says he already checked the files, and one of the guys immediately asks what he found. He leans in and says there's absolutely nothing about her in the records, meaning she must be some kind of special agent. Suddenly, she appears and asks who they're talking about. Out of nowhere, everyone jumps and almost topples over. Whoa, what's going on here? Everyone immediately straightens up. Even Torin looks shocked, asking what the orders are. Wow, the artist really went all out on this one. She tells them to calm down. She's not one of those old bureaucrats who abuse their power. The 6 most important things to her are fun, passion, and working in unconventional ways. One guy mutters, "A warrior," and that's only 3. Suddenly, Babapolia points at him and says, "All right then." He's pretty gutsy for calling her out like that. She walks over and hugs him, saying he deserves a reward. The poor guy looks like he's bracing for a kiss, but instead, she slaps a little frog sticker on him and says, "This one's special." Then she announces that the latest bank robberies, the kidnapping of the Koya family girl, and the dress shop incident are all going to be investigated together. Oh, and whoever gathers enough evidence on any of these 3 cases gets to go on a date with her. Torin tells everyone to behave, but then charges out headfirst, horns blazing. The guy on the left shouts, "Whoa, Chief Torin, I thought you didn't like those skinny girls." Skinny? Oh, give me a break. I don't even want to know what kind of world he's living in. Still, he's curious why Torin's running around with so much energy. Torin tells him to pipe down. He's just fired up to solve the case and make the city safer. Yeah, sure, buddy, sure. Meanwhile, Babapolia is sitting there calmly staring at her laptop, saying she's going to catch him the kid who loves breaking the city's rules. Turns out she's got a photo of our protagonist carrying Alpina. She's the one who snapped that pic on the day they caused all the chaos at the statue. Turns out she has a photo of our hero carrying Alpina. She's the one who snapped that shot on the day they wreaked havoc at the statue. Next, the scene shifts to a grand theater in Lighthouse City. At the entrance, 2 guys are chatting. One mentions it looks like someone named Male is about to show up. The other replies that's unbelievable. If he's talking about that guy from the feudal empire, then those folks are pretty impressive. The best of the bunch is their assassin crew, the Hell Hounds. His friend nods, adding that those guys had the nerve to storm the Golden District and take out high-ranking nobles. As they talk, a flash of golden hair sweeps by. It's the main character arriving with Alpina. Nothing shady going on, right? A kid barely taller than 4 feet walking beside a tall woman dressed in gold. She snaps at him to snap out of it, warning him he can't just be staring at her for free. The 2 clowns immediately apologize, realizing they've been caught staring. The one on the left asks, "Didn't you even check if she had a ticket?" His buddy answers her presence was just too overwhelming. She's definitely a noble lady. The protagonist compliments her, saying she's incredible. Meanwhile, the quirky girl tries to lick his face again. She mutters that he's tired of the servant life already. The protagonist hands Alpina a lollipop and says they need to memorize every little detail of the place, because next Friday, Inu his dad will be here with a bunch of nobles. Tonight's play features the Ice Mermaid, Cold Little Sister's Holiday, and the Golden Ship. Alpina quietly watches everything as the protagonist scans the surroundings. They reach the main hall's entrance, and as they step in, Alpina suddenly glances sideways and there he is, the theatrical genius male. Her eyes widen as she recalls he's the dad who left her. Wow, the guy's actually famous now. 2 hours later, the guy nicknamed the Rat walks ahead, telling Iso not to sweat it. He's memorized the location of every trash can. But the protagonist wants to know where Alpina went, and that's when they realize she's vanished. Then it flashes back 2 hours to when she first saw that painting. Her hand trembles in shock. She reaches out, touching it, when suddenly someone asks if she's a fan. It's the man himself, standing right there, saying he'd always heard Golden City was the center of the world, and now that he's here, he sees she's even more magical and amazing than he ever imagined. He says he wants to know the beautiful lady's name. Alpina gets all shy and starts to speak, but another little girl runs up, hugging him, calling him daddy. The mother arrives, telling Male there are people around, and he should show a bit more respect to her father. They all comment on how adorable the young girl is, and then poof, she disappears right in the middle of the hall. Outside, the sky darkens, lightning flashes, and rain starts to fall. 2 guards say, "That's weird. There wasn't any rain in today's forecast." Suddenly, Alpina storms past them. They call out to her, but she doesn't respond. Elsewhere in the city, in the famous Honest Worker District, an ALF is hustling for her daily bread. Nearby, a nasty one is selling drugs to a poor beggar, even though her stomach is ripped open. Seriously, what the heck? And another's all rough, stitching up a bodysuit with a gun strapped to her back. This place is seriously dangerous. Alpina dashes forward and accidentally bumps into an elderly gentleman who tells her to watch where she's going. The drug dealer spots her, and the honest worker remarks that someone from a high-class background like her shouldn't be wandering these streets. Alpina slips into a nearby alley, drops to her knees, and starts sobbing, questioning her true identity. She shivers in the shadowy alley just as another girl appears. The artist, clearly inspired by the girl's look, asks if she's lost. She gushes that Alpina is amazing and should join the Thousand Birds crew, but mentions the catch members aren't allowed to hold on to personal belongings, so the girl would have to give up that outfit to the group. Whoa! Tries to snatch Alpina's clothes, placing a firm hand on her and giving a threatening warning. Alpina refuses to hand it over, saying her master gifted it to her. Man, this tough cookie might be a handful, but she's begging for trouble. She slaps gentle Alpina across the face, challenging if she really won't take the outfit off. The pale blonde hunches over, trembling, insisting she won't give in. The tough girl pulls feathers from her hair and warns her she's in way over her head. She launches a feather attack, slicing through the air and cutting Alpina's face and arm, hitting every target. Meanwhile, she's wreaking havoc across the city. Iso urges the team to find Alpina quickly, just follow the orders. They reach a shadowy alley, and Cheese insists Alpina has to be hiding there. Iso tells him to move forward. What's the holdup? The Rat explains that ahead lies the Black Star District, a chaotic place that might seem flashy from the outside, but it's easy to get lost in, filled with countless dangerous forces. Iso scoffs, saying the Rat clearly doesn't respect him. Do you think I'm scared of some low-level punks? But the Rat insists, Iso, you're missing the point. This is the Thousand Birds hideout. Even the city patrol doesn't know how to handle these folks. Cut to a warehouse where they're admiring the outfit, saying it's gorgeous. The boss went all out and insists they at least question the girl. Alpina lies on the floor, completely beaten. The boss says this new recruit clearly doesn't understand the game and needs some serious training. The girl with the pipe comments that Alpina looks truly heartbroken. The woman with the torn midriff calls over the guys and calls them the worst kinds of men. Seriously, what are you planning to do with her, lady? They're already saying they want her dead, and the men agree, calling her nothing but trash. Worry sets in over what they might force Alpina to endure. Meanwhile, the boss tells Raven to use a soul search to uncover Alpina's identity. Raven places her hand gently over Alpina's face and catches glimpses Iso caring for her, checking her fever, then Alpina talking with her father, being dragged into an alley, locked in a cage, a tough-looking hound throwing bread at her like she's garbage. A brawl among beggars breaks out, fists flying, rocks thrown, chaos ensues. The man returns, and just then, Raven snaps awake, questioning if this girl really is who they suspect. Cut to Iso, with a massive insect latched on the head of another guy, forcing him to reveal where the woman in the golden dress was taken. He warns the man to look aside and see what happens to those who don't talk. When the man glances, one of his friends has his brains sucked out by another creepy insect. The man freaks, thinking, wow, Azizo's blood-sucking mosquitoes are definitely one of his cruelest inventions. She's freaking out, thinking, man, Azazo's blood-sucking mosquitoes are one of his cruelest inventions. He's definitely not thrilled to see them in action now. The guy says it was the boss, the Golden Phoenix, who sent her to that warehouse. Looks like the women plan to train her somehow. Iso tells the guy to point out exactly where that warehouse is. The scene shifts there. They open the door to find, as expected, everyone on the floor, bodies wrecked. Iso approaches the first corpse and sees neat, precise cuts across each neck. The rat-like guy observes it's the same pattern for them all. The protagonist finds it strange. If Alpina had lost control, she'd have wiped them all out completely. So why do the wounds look like they were made by blades? Then we spot who seems to be the boss off in a corner, slashed up and begging for help. When they check, it's the head of the organization, wearing see-through clothes. Cheese instantly recognizes the tattoo the man mentioned and says this must be the boss. The rats are thinking the back mountains feel oddly soft, but that rat needs to be behind bars too. The protagonist tells everyone to focus and start questioning before she dies. To keep her alive, they inject a healing serum into her spine. 3 minutes later, the girl's back is still trembling, saying she couldn't see it, she couldn't see the blade. Iso orders her to open her mouth and say, "Where's that woman in the golden dress?" But the girl's terrified, shaking, insisting she has no clue. Cut back an hour earlier to when Raven was digging through her memories. Wow, Alpina just grabbed an arm and snapped it instantly. The three are stunned, and suddenly her hair starts turning purple like it's transforming. She stares down hard, grabs the other girl by the arm. They're sure those girls were getting punished. 3 feathers fly toward them, but Alpina snags 2 with her fingers and catches one between her teeth. The boss notices that somehow her reactions have gotten insanely fast now. The muscular woman warns that this is their turf and she'd better let Raven go or she won't walk out alive. That's when Raven reveals Alpina might be connected to the Hell Hounds. Also, she's the spy in the Golden District who's been offing the nobles. Right away, the blonde freaks out, and the boss collapses. They tell Alpina to free Raven and say what kind of ransom she wants. The big woman calls them nuts, telling the boss that this girl isn't strong enough, and they have the numbers. The boss ignores her and snaps at her to shut up. Then she tells Alpina they'll keep her secret no problem. They don't care about the city's nobles, they'd honestly rather see them wiped out. Suddenly, Alpina tells her to slip into that invisible outfit. If you catch her drift, the girl looks confused. Why would she say that? The muscular woman says no way that the Chidori group, the 1,000 birds, can't be embarrassed like this. Raven just tells the girl to shut up and warns that if the boss refuses to surrender, everyone there is done for. The blonde chuckles, teasing Falcon that she's just grumpy because she's the smallest in the group and might have to join in too. Falcon yells at her to quiet down, but she can't even roll over on the bed thanks to this overwhelming power pressing down on her. The boss steps in, telling both of them to stop arguing and get her some clothes instead. But Raven senses something's not quite right. Logically, Hell Hounds never leave survivors. That's exactly when the masked man shows up, agreeing with her none of them should still be breathing. The girls glance up just as the villain arrives. Suddenly, he's already on the floor, slicing clean through the first guy's neck. She reaches out, but drops to the ground right away. Before passing out, she manages to warn the boss to run, but by then, the other friend's already down too. Raven's dead, and the boss just breaks down, tears streaming in pure hopelessness. The guy scoffs, calling it pathetic that one of the city's top gangs could be this useless. Back with Cheese, he's scratching his head, wondering if the Hell Hounds are really that strong. Then why did Alpina get knocked around by that old guy when they first found her? Meanwhile, Azo's more worried about her hair turning purple. That shouldn't happen when the cocoon of despair is supposed to protect her. The Silver Phoenix grabs his shirt, begging him to save Raven and everyone else. From now on, Chidori's her responsibility. The rat looks interested, typical. That guy always has some scheme up his sleeve. He checks the honest worker's pupils and says there's no response. Normal treatments won't cut it. The only option is to use that experimental tech, but Iso grabs the rat, telling him to quit joking around. They need to bring Alpina back as soon as possible. She's part of the most important experiment yet. The rat says to hold on, at least he can apply the preservation agent to this woman. Iser snaps. Weren't you saying saving others was pointless? The rat admits, yeah, I said that, and I'm no stranger to being a hypocrite. Then he tosses something that lands right in the Phoenix's hand, telling her to inject it so her skin and body don't rot beyond fixing. The scene cuts to a bridge in the city. Standing on top is Alpina, completely unhinged. She's obviously struggling. She touches her face, noticing she still has her left arm, her right eye, and her heart. Somehow, this body was preserved. But whose memories are these anyway? And why is all this happening to her? She can't remember a thing. The real owner of this body has taken back control. Then that guy from the Hell Hounds organization shows up behind her, calling out to Yorkshire. For crying out loud, these dog names are just awful. She spins around and calls him Doberman. They just lock eyes. It's like the story hits pause for a dramatic freeze frame. Then Doberman demands she hand over all the intel she's picked up. Why did the assassination of the Black Palace leader fail? And why'd she disappear for so long? Yorkshire guessed she has to name each personality differently. Now explains she managed to infiltrate the palace but suddenly found herself poisoned. A strange priest and a swordsman fought her, and she lost an arm, a leg, and an eye. Doberman says that swordsman must be Dondusk, one of the most badass guys around, known as the Living Law. He was a licensed hero ranked number 5. No surprise she got wrecked by him. Now, Doberman wants to know if, after losing all that, why is she standing here in one piece? Yorkshire says she honestly has no clue. Seems someone was watching over her the entire time she was out cold. The guy shrugs, saying it doesn't matter now that she's breathing. Her eyesight's back. She says she gets it, but Iso suddenly appears, saying he won't allow any of that because from here on out, he's her master. The two glance sideways, puzzled, and there's the boy, standing barely 4 feet tall, farming aura like a champ. Doberman asks who this kid is, and she says he's the one who saved her. Doberman notes that even the repair to her vocal cords proves this boy treated her well. Good for him. She's not about to betray her master for the kid. She bows her head and insists she'd never do a thing like that. But the next second, he orders her to end his life. He mutters that once he's gone, they'll have more critical matters to focus on. Yorkshire nods in understanding, stands up, and strides over to Iso. Standing nose to nose, she glares and warns he really shouldn't have followed her. The kid's got guts. He pulls off his mask and says, "The second you joined the Perserad family, you became my property. If you don't come home now like a good little girl, I'm going to have to beat you." She freezes, PTSD crashing in hard. The pain overwhelms her, and she snaps, telling him to shut his mouth. Then someone grabs her hand. Guess who's back? It's Lucille herself, the demonist, fuming and insisting it's time to settle the score with the brat. Iso just tells her to use the Black Plague on the girl already because if she loses it, he won't be coming to her rescue this time. Lucille tells the kid to chill out. Out of all the viruses out there, the Black Plague is the easiest one to handle. Watching Iso back off, she asks if he really plans to take her home and spend the night. He confirms, but warns if she fails, real prison time's waiting for her. Then Iso steps in front of Doberman and says there's only one way to decide who owns experiment number 1. Wipe out the entire Hell Hound pack. Doberman's stance screams, anyone stepping within 5 meters of me won't be walking away alive. You're already one step away from that. Yorkshire tries to say something, but Doberman slashes at Iso. Oof. It lands. Iso drops to his knees, wondering if that's the real power of the Hell Hound. Doberman smirks and says, all bark and no bite. Huh, Iso. Suddenly, a feather flies just inches from his face. Yorkshire strikes back. Doberman grabs her arm and warns she'll have to wait a long while or risk being branded a traitor. Then he asks why she's crying. At that moment, Lucille panics because she was holding Alpina's arm, but now the arm's just lying on the floor. She's stunned, insisting it can't be. She didn't feel a thing. Alpina calls the bastard out, telling them she already warned them. A glowing pentagram appears in her eye. Doberman questions if she really plans to do this to save the kid who rescued her. He reminds her the Hell Hounds don't care about anyone. Meanwhile, Iso is on the ground, laughing until he's breathless. Doberman, confused, asks why the boy's still breathing. The protagonist stands up and apologizes, explaining that she was already infected with cell proliferation. He says the only reason he let that slash land on her neck was to test if she still remembered him under the Hell Hound's influence. He straightens his jacket and says no one from the Perserad family would die from such a silly trick. Then he tells her to get back to her master. Instead, she drives her knee straight into his gut. Doberman's stunned. This girl is beating everyone. Lucille shouts at the bastard to stay put or she'll take her out on the spot. Yorkshire declares she's not that clueless girl anymore. If they keep pushing her, she's going to lose control. Whoa, that sounds serious. But Iso, smiling, says he disagrees. For example, he's got this little teddy bear here. He knows it means everything to her. And instead of being turned into a killing machine with the Hell Hounds, she should join him and help change the world through alchemy. He wants to create a place where you can keep your loved ones safe and close. Doberman counters, saying that sounds like a fantasy because even if such a place ever existed, he won't live to see it happen. He starts muttering about weakness, hesitation, doubt, and emotions, just as a whole squad of Hell Hounds rolls onto the bridge. He declares that no one there deserves to be among the Hell Hounds and orders them to take everyone out. The group rushes forward, but Iso just laughs, saying they really think sheer numbers will win the day these days. Pulling out a pistol with a crazed grin, he says it's time to clean up this mess. Then, out of nowhere, a strange capsule rockets up into the sky, exploding above the bridge in a shower of purple sparks. Suddenly, a dragon materializes overhead. The next chapter jumps back to before they even knew about Alpina's new personality. Iso tells the rat to hold still, something's bothering him. She knows exactly what he means. Iso brings up how her hair turned purple, which was supposedly her original form. What if the body's original consciousness fully took over Alpina? She'd control the emerald gold and the angel arm, which would be a total nightmare to handle. And on top of that, she might start working with the Hell Hounds and recovering all sorts of memories, which could be dangerous too. Cheese covers his mouth and says, "Hey, quit jinxing it. That's pretty risky, but what else can we do?" The protagonist replies that if it comes to that, they'll have to unleash Lucille. To take down a high-level creature, you need another one. Cut to the base, Lucille's there, dressed in that stealth suit. The rat warns everyone to be careful. She's seriously dangerous. If she loses control, everyone could be toast. Plus, she's in a coma, but Iso insists she's faking it. She actually woke up the day after passing out, thanks to a DNA memory trick. Even if just one of her cells survives inside someone, like a virus, she can wake up and instantly reclaim her body. Basically, Lucille can't die as long as there's one infected person somewhere in the world, and on top of that, she can quickly regenerate and rebuild her entire body. He tells the nerd to give props to the genius who designed this flawless experiment. The rat fires back that he doesn't seem so genius, having to use charms to keep her under control. Iso tells him to zip it, and the protagonist grabs the mic, telling Lucille to stop faking it. If she keeps lying there, she'll miss her only chance to move those legs. The woman in the sleigh just smiles. Then she stands, taps the glass, and asks if little Azizo is coming along too. The scene shifts to a candy-colored trailer in the middle of the city. Someone mutters, "This place feels way too cozy." It's Bapolia herself, relaxing and munching on donuts. The chief next to her complains her donut truck is overloaded with a ridiculous amount of gadgets, attracting too much attention. She tells him to shut it. The truck's customized to fit her style. Besides, it's disguised as a donut truck but packs a ton of other features. She calls it her office and shuts him up by shoving a donut in his mouth. Suddenly, an alert pops up: emergency on the bridge. A dragon has appeared. Babapolia grins, saying it's about time she got to help protect the city. Without warning, the trailer speeds off, leaving everyone else at the base totally confused. Apparently, they went out for donuts and forgot to wait for the rest. The scene cuts to another location, the White Queen's residence. That guy selling manhwa is still frozen stiff on the throne. Someone wearing clogs walks by, but a masked guard quickly warns them that the president is resting and should not be bothered. A girl named Cryaway, who looks like one of the White Queen's heroines, says a dragon has appeared, and things are getting totally wild. The masked guard replies that the city escort will try handling it first, but if they fail, the president will step in. Fry comments that the dragon resembles the black-winged dragon that destroyed his town 10 years ago. The masked guard grabs her hand and insists again. The president is resting, and no one interrupts her. The strange girl clings to the ice statue. Meanwhile, the dragon glares down from the bridge. Everyone is trembling and scattering. The beast lunges, snatching up 4 or 5 people right out of the air. Hearing the name Perserad, Doberman recalls a group of alchemists from 100 years ago. Suddenly, some purple dragons approach him. Lucille appears, saying she thinks he has enough time to worry about his subordinates, but she's more curious which way he'd rather go: malaria, fever, Ebola, or something else. Since he's a hellhound and basically a dog, dying of rabies might actually suit him best. Back there, Isizo hands the teddy bear back to Yorkshire and tells her to accept that she's now part of the Perserad family, or she can take this dagger and return to being controlled by the Hell Hounds. The choice is hers. He won't interfere. She hesitates for a moment, lifts her hand above the teddy, and just like he hoped, she's about to make the right decision. But then, she twists her wrist, grabs the dagger, and says, "Hold this teddy for now. I've got other things I need to handle." During the fight, Lucille presses the Hellhound, who keeps retreating, demanding to know where the big boss is. The protagonist advises her to stop following Doberman around. He's trying to lure her away so he can take him out later. She should stick close now. At that moment, a pack of Hellhounds sneaks up behind him, but Lucille's dark dragon tears through them, and the protagonist reminds her she's got to protect him. She says she gets it and promises not to let any of those jerks lay a finger on her guy. Isa tells her to stop drifting away and step closer. She moves in tight. The poor kid's about to have zero personal space now. Meanwhile, Alpina steps toward Doberman, who asks if she's finally ready to face him. He reminds her he's the one who taught her every move she knows, and that if she hadn't joined the Hellhounds, her stepmother would have tortured and killed her. Then Alpina stabs her own hand. Isizo looks puzzled, and Doberman seems a little freaked out. She says, "Eye, throat, arm, hand, stomach, 12 spots total. Basically, to escape the Hellhounds, you have to take a hit to each of those points, and if you survive, you're free." She orders Doberman to hit her. He asks if she's lost her mind, risking all this for that kid. She reminds him that no one has ever survived the 13 Fangs attack, Wait, was it 12? Now it's getting longer? Seriously. Cheap shot. Iso yells from a distance that Alpina shouldn't hurt herself, her body belongs to him, so she has no right. She just turns around and says this is her business. If he tries to interfere, the only thing he'll get is a corpse. The poor protagonist stands there, noise-canceling headset on, muttering that she's absolutely impossible to control. Meanwhile, Lucille finishes off her opponent and asks for permission to go after that girl. She said it would be a piece of cake, but Doberman peeled off his mask and said she wasn't even close to being like her mother. That woman wouldn't bother asking anyone for help, she'd be straight at his throat without a second thought. Yorkshire asked if he really knew her mother. Doberman said there was no point in hiding it, her mother was the fiercest hellhound hunter around, and was actually his mentor. It was a real shame she got tangled up with some third-rate actor. She tried to escape once, but her master stopped her. Still, she kept fighting tooth and nail, over and over. Finally, the master gave the order, and Doberman himself had to step in. Before she passed, she begged to finish sewing that teddy bear. Why was he telling her all this? Clearly, Yorkshire was starting to lose it. She shouted she'd kill him for sure. He smirked and said, "Now you finally look the part." He had zero interest in keeping trash like her, wagging her tail for someone else. Then, their fight kicked off, both charging full tilt. Explosions, flashes, blades clashing nonstop. They blurred past each other. Yorkshire got a nasty cut across her face, and Doberman said her feelings made her vulnerable. But then he realized his own heart was slashed. He dropped to his knees, asking if she really mastered the Abyss of the Heartbreaker. What a dramatic name. She said he once told her the first person to nail that move would be the one to take him down. He looked down, muttering that now he understood what destiny meant. That was the last technique their master taught him, and ironically, he used it to kill her. As he faded away, he said it was unbelievable. Even her voice sounded exactly like their master's. He dropped a key, and Yorkshire caught it in midair. Lucille just stood there like me, thinking, wow, that was kind of sad and way too quick. What a lame fight. Meanwhile, Iso was asking why Yorkshire ran off. Lucille explained that after killing Doberman, the girl felt her life lost all meaning and jumped into the sea. The main character went to check it out but noticed something weird. The whole bridge was rigged with explosives. They were everywhere, and an old man was standing there with a detonator, ready to blow it. The protagonist tried to fire up his suit's anti-gravity system, but the fuel was totally drained, and I was just thinking, where the heck's Cheese? It all made sense now. No one was crossing the bridge because he was blocking traffic. You take out the guard, and of course, no one's getting between him and his Iso's fight. Then Babapolia rolled up in her truck, saying her ice cream was melting and she needed to get through as soon as possible. If he let her pass, she promised to let him have a taste. And the way she positioned herself, the rat got exactly what she meant. The jerk leaned in with a grin and said, "Well, I gotta try it first to see if you really deserve to get through." But Bapole was already pulling out a shotgun with her other hand. The officer asked what she was up to, and she said she checked the bridge workers' files, no ruins listed. With all the recent heists, this guy might be one of the bank robbery suspects. Just then, Cheese showed up, grinning ear to ear, all pumped to get some ice cream, and boom, the whole bridge exploded. But then we flash back 2 minutes earlier, our hero dragon blasting flames everywhere, roaring mad, ready to burn every last one of those punks to ash. With a big, happy grin, ready to enjoy his ice cream, the entire bridge detonates. But rewind 2 minutes, our hero, the dragon, breathes fire everywhere, roaring with fury, vowing to tear those punks apart one by one. Iso knows that even if he'd had that huge armored beast by the cage, there's no way he could have defended against this. Out of nowhere, he grabs Lucille's arm. That quirky girl is constantly blushing like a tomato. She figures Iso has finally realized she's actually a stronger, way more useful experiment. And now, he's even holding her hand. The main guy just tells her to zip it and jumps too, right as the entire bridge blows up. From afar, a weird old man watches it all. If I'm reading this right, that's the Hell Hounds master, isn't it? He mutters that Doberman held on until the very last second, but, sadly, he couldn't take down the woman he's crazy about. The elf chimes in, saying Doberman basically begged to be taken out. The old man grumbles that the moment Doberman met Yorkshire, he was good as useless. And don't even get him started on that bastard poking around the noble cases they were handling. They were supposed to alert the Black Palace, find Yorkshire, and warn about a third mysterious group messing with their play. Meanwhile, Cheese calls Iso, asking what the hell happened and why the bridge went kaboom. Iso stays quiet, and Cheese figures the kids pulled some dumb stunt. He takes off running, but Babapolia spots him. Everyone else is curious about what's going on. She just stands there, chill as ever, saying she nearly caught that sneaky rat this time. The old head of the association coughs weakly, like he's about to kick the bucket, complaining that getting old sucks worse than anything, and his body won't last much longer. He desperately needs that tech. The elf asks if he really believes Golden City holds immortality and whether living forever means that much to him. The old man says an elf, living for thousands of years, would never truly get it. She leans in close and tells him not to stress. If he dies, she'll take herself out and tag along. Hey now, scram, you weirdo. The Huntmaster tells the Harem they become immortal together and stick by each other forever. Right then, the main guy pops up, asking if the old man's really chasing immortality. If that's what he wanted, he wouldn't need to grovel to the noble ranks. He could just hand it over if that's his true wish. The old man asks who's there, and the protagonist introduces himself as Iso Perserad, the most brilliant alchemist of this century. The old man scoffs. That's impossible. 200 kilos of top-grade explosives went off. Nobody should have made it through that bridge blast. Iso shows off his shredded coat, a thank you to the junkie raid, proving they barely scraped by. Let's rewind to about 20 minutes earlier. The moment he leaps with Lucille and the devices start to go off, suddenly black wings sprout around her, power surges toward Iso, wrapping them both into a tight ball as the massive explosion flings them toward the ocean. She's clutching him, calling him a dummy. He ought to be running instead of worrying about her since she's just a black virus. Of everyone on Earth, he, as her creator, should know that better than anyone. The Huntmaster asks where the rest of the guards are. Lucille grins and asks if he means those cute fellas. Turns out, they're already riding on her dragon's backs. The old man looks baffled, asking how the two of them survived and what exactly happened. Iso answers that the bombs were ridiculously obvious, and whoever detonated them had to be watching every move, so they could only have been right there on site. The Huntmaster tells him to cut the chatter and get to the point. Iso says he's not asking for much, just wants to interrogate the old man, break him down until he's barely hanging on, and squeeze every bit of info about the Hell Hounds out of him. Garcia calls out to the old man while he pleads desperately not to be killed. His whole body is about to be shredded into thousands of pieces in just a second. Out of nowhere, his hand starts shaking like he's trying to press some tiny button beneath it. Iso comments it's a shame, looks like he's lost control of his muscles. Huh. The old man's confused, so Io explains the room is already drenched in dragon spider venom. He adds that when he walked in, he spotted 18 floor panels rigged as traps. The old man says something's definitely off. Not even Doberman could pinpoint which tiles were booby-trapped. Iso shrugs it off and says it's easy to explain. The experiment beside him can sense things down to the molecular level. Iso tells them those 18 tiles had zero traces of sugars or peroxides. Weirdly enough, those 18 tiles form a safe path straight to the throne. So, ironically, those were the only safe spots. The rest of the floor, yeah, all traps. The protagonist tells Lucille he's not sure if there are traps near the old man, so she should take care of that. She agrees, then sends her two wolves charging right at the old man. I figured someone would step in, but nope, they just drag him along like it's no big deal. Garcia calls out to him, while the old man pleads desperately not to be killed. He spills that someone known as the Dog Keeper is the real puppet master behind the Loma Empire and created the Hell Hounds as a secret way to off whoever he wanted. They wormed so deep into the system that even the Emperor's just taking orders from them. The protagonist laughs, saying, it's kind of hilarious a guy who's trained killers for 150 years is now just baiting a kid who isn't even 18 yet. He tells the old man to start spilling all the details about his deals and arrangements with the nobles. The old man stutters, begging for his life, then suddenly looks like he's losing consciousness. Right after, something injects into his neck, and when he opens his eyes again, he looks completely rejuvenated as if he's back in his prime. Iso shows a video and tells him to be impressed. The old man, just as confused as I am, asks if the boy really has immortality and wonders why he would help him. Iso explains it's because his goal is to wipe out every noble in this world and take control of the Golden City. The old man nods, finally catching on that Iso wants the intel he has on the nobility. Then the scene shifts to a girl undergoing torture. It's tough to make sense of what's exactly going on. She's stretched out over a cauldron, and I think they're collecting her sweat in a jar. Yikes. This guy is playing on a whole other level that's hard to even wrap my head around. And the worst part? I think that's Rain's dad, Inju. He says he's bored. Completely bored because even after all this time, nobody's had the guts to kill him. Seems like those women were hellhound assassins. The Huntmaster explains to the protagonist that they made a bet with the nobles. If the hellhounds could injure a noble, they'd get some sort of recognition. The protagonist asks why the nobles would want to get attacked. Were they just bored? Was the city too quiet? The Huntmaster confirms that boredom was the exact word they kept using. He realizes that everything that happened to Alpina, who's now living as Yorkshire, was all because some wealthy fool craved an adrenaline rush. She and all those hellhounds were nothing more than pawns on someone else's chessboard. Meanwhile, Yorkshire still clutches that key as we flash back to a chat she once had with Doberman about a certain investigation. He warned her that whatever he uncovered could very well cost him his life. He said the most valuable thing he owned was locked away in container C-428 down at the East Docks. If he died before his mission was done, she was supposed to go there and see what was inside. Yorkshire looks puzzled, but he just tells her it's something important for her, too. Back in the present, she's walking along the docks, wondering what might be inside that container. But then her hair starts shifting back to its normal color. She suddenly stops, and before she knows it, she's alpine again, totally clueless about how she even got there. She crouches in the middle of the street until someone remarks that she never listens. It's the protagonist teleporting in right beside her, teasing that she's always stirring up trouble. She jumps at the sudden appearance, and he's grinning, telling her to get up and come along. It's time to head home, acting all sweet like that shameless guy who's always got a crowd of stunning women around him. What a life, huh? I want to be an alchemist, too. The blonde kid from Full Metal Alchemist, yeah, he didn't have quite this kind of lucky streak with alchemy. The scene cuts back to the base right when Iso steps behind the old chief, who's begging for forgiveness, saying Yorkshire is alive and well, so everything's okay. The protagonist says he doesn't even know who Yorkshire is. That's not her real name. The chief confirms, telling him she has another name that's just her code name. The protagonist asks if he still believes she belonged to the Hell Hounds. The chief quickly says, no way. Now she belongs to the Perserad or Perkel family, whatever it's called. The protagonist asks what's going to happen to the old organization now. The Huntmaster kneels and says that from now on, everyone is at his command. Iso looks interested but says the guy will have to prove his sincerity first. The chief hands him a ring of keys, saying all their treasures are locked away on that ship and he can have them. Iso takes the keys and says it's a good start, but it's still not enough. The chief agrees and says he'll gather everything hidden around the city of Loma and have it sent over. Man, I keep telling you, this kid's a total pervert. What's the only thing Iso really wants? Beautiful women, of course. This guy's definitely got some kind of woman-stealing gene, a serious menace to society. Somebody please ban him already. The old man looks confused, while the protagonist asks if they've sealed the deal or not. The Huntmaster shivers, then grins, calls for Barcia, and declares that from this moment forward, she belongs to Lord Iso, and she needs to be a good girl and follow his orders. Dang. Barcia immediately hates this guy's guts. I didn't expect her to be so strong-willed. Well, maybe we kinda guessed, but it's always something to witness up close. The protagonist lifts her chin and asks if the old man didn't want immortality just to be with her. How does he even have the nerve to negotiate like this? Suddenly, he clamps a gravity device around her neck and asks if the old man really agrees to her becoming one of his test subjects. The Huntmaster says the Hell Hounds have already submitted to the boy, and even if it breaks his heart, they'll never disobey his orders. But deep down, the old man is thinking, one day, I'll unlock the secret to immortality and wipe out every last one of those Dan Prules along with all the nobles. Iso tells the Huntmaster to make the most of his new body and take back the throne he cherishes so much. The man climbs the stairs, trembling, while Iso says that as long as he's around, he'll always be the one calling the shots. He tells the great Huntmaster to give his first major order. Excited, the man starts to shout it out, but suddenly his nose starts bleeding. Drops fall right into his lap, and he looks puzzled, not understanding what's going on. Then, blood begins pouring from his eyes. He asks what Iso did to his body. The protagonist smirks and explains that what he actually injected was something called Athoth-01. In theory, it's a serum that cures all types of decay and every symptom of aging in any carbon-based creature. The old man demands to know why his body is reacting so weirdly, and Iso calmly explains that Athoth-01 only works on those with pure Peevel blood. The old man angrily asks why he would do something like that after swearing his loyalty. Iso replies that he could never trust someone who betrayed the person they love. That kind of person is way too dangerous. Dan completely humiliated the guy, gave him a lecture, took everything he owned, stole his woman, and then killed him. That's just brutal. Seriously. I didn't buy it when he said he was the city's most ruthless villain before, but now, yeah, I'm starting to believe it. Garcia breaks down, crying in his arms. At least, I hope that's what's going on. Meanwhile, she walks in saying it ended way too fast. Iso tosses him the key and tells him to team up with Lucille, grab all the loot, and get ready to head back home. They're also taking the elves because she seems to be from some super rare emerald blood elven race. The rat says he can handle everything but asks where the boy is heading. Iso answers like it's obvious he's going to fetch that idiot Alpina since the dagger he gave her has a built-in tracker, and he knows she's nearby. An hour later, that's when he found her out in the rain and brought her home. Now we're back at base. Poor protagonist is suffering from success. Gravitational orbs circle his head, ready to crush his skull from every angle. Lucille is pulling on him, reminding him they agreed earlier tonight he's hers. But Alpina snaps back that too much has happened and she's the one staying with him tonight. The two start tugging him back and forth, while Cheese just stands there listening, wondering if he should envy or pity the kid. Jupiter might have the strongest gravity in the solar system, but right now, it looks like our guy is the one feeling crushed. We cut back to 3 hours earlier when the argument first broke out. He pushed them apart, telling them to stop bothering him. They better chill because he's the one in charge. If they kept this nonsense up, he'd turn both of them into unstable test subjects. Alpina says fine, while Lucille reminds him he already promised, so he can't back out now. Iso remembers that promise, knowing if he breaks it, his bargaining power would be worthless, so he agrees and says, fine, Lucille can have tonight, and she cheers like she won the lottery. Then he looks at Alpina and says since she disobeyed him, she's not sleeping here tonight. She looks like she's about to cry, but he orders her to stop whining, grab her blanket, and get out. She shoots him one last painful glare before walking away, clearly upset, while Lucille smirks from the shadows. He warns her one more teasing word at Alpina, and she's crashing on the floor too. No sooner does the door click shut than the quirky villain makes her move. He quickly tells her to back off because he needs a moment in the bathroom. He's figuring out how on earth he'll make it through the night when Lucille suddenly pops up, calling him adorable. Poor guy jumps, stumbles backward. Oh man, I can't even start to describe that mess. Picture this. Scene 1. Scene 2. Then she babbles something about inorganic salts and how he's actually healthy. Thank goodness for that. The main guy grabs the shower head, sprays her down, brushes his teeth, and firmly tells her to buzz off. The crazy girl grins wide, flashing those teeth, insisting they're spotless, and demands he open his mouth so she can check his breath. Of course, as soon as he opens up, she swoops in again, tackling him down. He warns her straight up. Next time she pulls that stunt, she's out in the living room. She says she gets it, but if you look at her face, she's definitely not buying it. Honestly, that girl's a little terrifying. Meanwhile, our guy's sitting there, mentally replaying everything crazy that happened today. Clearly, he's way too nervous to hit the sack. No surprise there. Lucille asks when he's finally coming to bed. It's past midnight, what's he even still writing? He says he's almost done, and if she's tired, she should go ahead and crash first. Lucille's face falls a bit. She says if he hates her so much, he doesn't have to keep pretending to stick to that promise. She stands, says goodbye, and heads off to sleep outside. She pretends to cry, and of course, Iso buys it. What a sucker. He turns back and tells her he's almost finished. She can say whatever's on her mind. Then he flips off the lights, saying it's time to sleep, while that schemer sits there grinning, thinking how easily she fakes sadness. Once they lie down, he tells her she can hug him if she wants, but that's it, nothing more. But then he notices something off. She's not leaning in. When he looks over, she's trembling. Lucille starts wondering why, now that she's finally here, she feels so hesitant and scared. She explains that for 1,322 days, she was trapped there. Every single moment, she dreamed about holding his hand, hugging him, and sleeping by his side. Those hopes and thoughts are what kept her going through all that pain. She breaks down, saying something feels wrong, that her very cells pull toward him and she can't fight it. The guy apologizes, pulls her close, saying he was too harsh. He vows never to lock her up like that again. Finally, things soften, and it's a sweet, emotional moment. Thank goodness. Meanwhile, the rat is glued to some strange fight on TV, though honestly, I can't even tell what's going on. Still, he's totally into it and nearly jumps out of his seat when Alpina suddenly shows up next to him, looking gloomy. He asks what's wrong. The fight's still playing, and the rat starts freaking out, realizing he probably ought to change the channel. He quickly flips to something safer, like a Pac-Man flick or something, and invites Alpina to sit next to him and watch. But the moment she sits down, his panic flares again. What do I do now? If she stays here, I can't enjoy my show. No way I'm giving up my perfect TV time just because Isaizo's here. Then he mumbles that Isaizo's just too soft. If he kicked her out, it's probably a sign she needs to go back in. Giving up on him now would basically hand him over to Lucille on a silver platter. He reminds her she's the strongest experiment here, so by right, she should be the one standing by his side. Alpina quietly agrees maybe she really does deserve that role. The rat senses that chaos is about to break loose, but meanwhile, he just wants to sit back and enjoy the show. He cracks open Aso's door and releases a cloud of sleeping gas. Sleep formula number 3. Deadly stuff. He slips a mask over Alpina's face, starts a countdown, and at 1, wishes her a good night's rest. She thanks him, crawls through the doorway, and he closes it gently, pulls off his mask, and breathes a sigh of relief. Now he can finally watch his cherished fight in peace. Meanwhile, Alpina creeps closer, spotting Lucille curled up, fast asleep against the protagonist. Seeing it, she rips off her mask, furious. Lucille just smirks, telling her to thank Cheese for letting that gas loose. Now Iso can't do a thing. Alpina springs forward, but Lucille blocks her, and the scuffle spills off the bed. Alpina shouts that no eating the master is allowed, and Lucille fires back that she wasn't eating, just gave him a tiny lick on the neck. But then her hand starts to burn, and she remembers the flame angel's arm that scorched her so badly before. There's no way she can win this without losing her chance completely. Lucille warns her if she uses that firepower now, she might hurt Iso. The heat dies down, and Lucille grins, saying they're both high-risk experiments. She admits Alpina is strong. Maybe they can just share his affection, 50-50. One on the left, one on the right. Alpina pauses to think, then agrees to the deal. Lucille, proud as ever, thinks to herself that Alpina is such an easy mark and tells her to lie down. So Lucille lies down first, knowing for some reason Iso really does like this quirky girl. Starting a fight now would only make her lose. Bit by bit, she'll get closer and eventually claim Iso entirely for herself. While Iso is getting crushed by Jupiter, the scene shifts to a giant airship flying over the city, the alchemy amplifier called the Throne of Pearl. Wait, or is this all just a dream? The protagonist sits on that throne, commanding the entire city below. Alpina is there too, dressed in military uniform. He tells him to throw on his cloak. With a grateful nod, he says she's finally figuring out how to follow orders. But when he tries to get up, he's frozen in place. Something heavy is pressing down on him. That's when he begins to come to and realizes what's really going on. Glancing sideways, he wonders why Alpina is there too. As if that wasn't enough, the blanket feels damp. Oh no, please don't tell me she had an accident in bed. The protagonist starts scolding Alpina, while Lucille bursts out laughing. Naturally, it was her doing. She must have cast some kind of spell on poor Alpina to make her lose control of her bladder. Clearly, her goal was to guarantee Iso would never let Alpina share his bed again. And it works perfectly. Iso announces Alpina is now banned from sleeping there. He explains he can't risk the fluids of a so-called high-risk test subject contaminating his space and putting his life in jeopardy. Lucille complains that it's a bummer, she's now the only one who gets to bunk with him, but he cuts her off right away, letting her know that they'll each be getting their own rooms and sleeping solo. Lucille looks puzzled, saying that just doesn't add up. She points out she wasn't the one who caused all the trouble. Iso snaps back that she's way too heavy and ends up crushing him, so that's a no-go. She pouts, insisting she's light as a feather and there's no need to stress, but Iso turns away, saying he's pretty sure who's really responsible for Alpina's mess. He reminds them both they're important experiments who need to learn to stand on their own instead of clinging to him all day long. Lucille nods but then wraps her arms around his leg at the same time, promising she'll behave from now on. All she wants is to be close at night. Alpina chimes in with the same plea, and suddenly they're both teary-eyed, clinging to his feet. Meanwhile, somewhere else, someone's asking about a missing freighter. Cut to Babapolia's office. She adds that any experiments who don't follow orders or stick to their own space don't deserve the freedom they've been given. Iso thinks to himself he's lucky to have the rat around to help keep things in line. Then she pulls out a chart, a weekly roster showing who gets to sleep beside Iso each night. He says that way there's no more fighting. The main guy just stares, trying to wrap his head around why this is the plan. Lucille asks why Sunday's left blank, and the rat explains they flip a coin that day fair and square. Iso immediately whips out his gun, calling it an amazing plan, and blasts that paper to pieces. That's enough, he says. Nobody's sleeping with me anymore. Problem solved. 0 nights. Then he tells Ches to start the report on gathering the Hell Association's assets. She says everything's stored in room B21. Isa tells him they'll take a look, but warns the two girls to stay put and obey orders. Lucille wraps her arm around Alpina, declaring, now we're best friends forever. Meanwhile, far away, someone is inquiring about a missing freighter ship. The scene shifts to Babapolia's office. She demands all records tracing where that ship went. Right then, the poor bald guy, the one who's always beat up and never gets a break, steps up, telling the director they're searching everywhere for whatever she needs. He nervously asks if maybe he could take her out on a date sometime, but she just says she's been working hard and doesn't have time for that. Still trying his luck, the guy offers her a ring with a genuine sea stone worth 20,000 gold coins. He says he originally bought it for his 50th wedding anniversary, but now he wants to give it to her instead. One of the guards grabs him, saying he can't just hand gifts back to his boss like that. Babapolia tells him if he manages to find out where that ship went, then he'll earn his date. As for the ring, he should just give it back to his wife. Back at the base, they're inside warehouse B21, and the main guy is itching to check out all the stuff they've collected. Chaos reaches into his chest, pulls something out, and tosses it on the floor. Suddenly, the whole floor lights up purple, and a gigantic ship appears right in front of them. Iso already knows what's up. She says, I bet the city security folks are losing their minds trying to track this ship down without a clue where it disappeared to. but they don't even know subspace alchemy is a thing. With that, the two of them jump aboard. She starts listing out all the items, and the total value adds up to about 200 million. The main guy thanks her since they're going to have to splash a lot of cash to craft the next set of alchemy tools. She also mentions there were 4 Hell Hounds knocked out nearby, so the protagonist orders a brainwash, installs control devices on them, and sends them back out. If those guys climb the ranks in the group, there'll be some seriously solid undercover agents. All that was left was to check the containers meant for the nobles, and Iso told him to open them. He grabbed the blowtorch, melted the door, and the moment it swung open, Iso got this weird feeling that something strange was lurking inside. Suddenly, a red eye glared from the darkness, and he immediately told Cheese to back up. Both of them bolted out fast, but a tentacled creature lunged at them, 1 strike each. Man, that was one ugly beast. And the worst part, Cheese pointed out something on one of the tentacles. There was this armor piece attached, carrying Iso's family crest. The protagonist thought that was odd that emblem is only used for their highest-risk bioweapons. It made no sense for it to be on that creature, but Cheese shrugged, saying they'd figure it out later. For now, they needed to pin it down. He threw one of those spider poison bombs, but the monster started absorbing it through its nose. The big rat looked totally baffled. How on earth was that thing soaking up something that knocks out every other monster? Iso sidestepped and fired a weapon that turns everything into slime. The thing started working, and Cheese said, "Now, this'll be a piece of cake." But strangely enough, the creature bit off one of its own tentacles to stop the rest of its body from turning into slime. The protagonist was stunned. This monster practiced self-cannibalism, basically making it immune to a lot of their gear. Right then, she said they'd need Lucille's help to handle this thing safely. But poor Lucille's sick. She was coughing into a handkerchief, looking rough, really beat up. Out of nowhere, Alpina shows up, telling her she can't just be swiping stuff from the master like that. Lucille, pissed off, tells her to quit, popping up out of nowhere every single time. Then suddenly, the blonde girl offers her a tangerine, saying it tastes amazing. Confused, the demon girl tells her to stop offering anything she's touched because it's gross. But Alpina ignores her and just shoves one right into her mouth. Lucille, fuming, tries to punch her, but Alpina's all cute, saying, "We're friends now." That's when Lucille remembers what she said in front of Iso and wonders if he actually bought it. Back with Iso, he figures it actually makes sense that the creature is high risk. He asks where that elf Garcia is, and they say she's in the main hall. Right away, the protagonist says he'll be back soon and tells them to hold things down for now. Man, he finds the poor girl chained up in an electrostatic trap with dragon venom underneath. Yeah, there's no way she's breaking out of that. But the protagonist goes soft, frees her, and she collapses to the floor, huge as ever. He rushes to help, telling her to drink the antidote so she can move again. But wow, that woman's dangerous. The second she takes a sniff, she grabs a blade and tries to take herself out. The protagonist has to stop her, hurting his own hand while telling her she doesn't understand she belongs to him, meaning even breathing, ending her life, or doing anything else. All of it requires his permission. Meanwhile, Cheese is blasting that monster with a seriously scorching weapon. But that darn thing's adapting too. Looks like he'll need something way more lethal to handle it. That's when Iso shows up, saying that won't be necessary. The elf stands right beside him, and when he peels off her blindfold, her eyes suddenly blaze a bright blue, seemingly paralyzing the creature. The monster freezes entirely and crashes down. She's like, "What even was that? Did she kill it, or what?" The protagonist replies, "No, it's probably just asleep." Like he mentioned before, she's a rare emerald elf, still clinging to life. But Iso tells her to stop risking her life for someone who's already lost. The guy might have loved her once, but that was a long time ago. And a love that's left unresolved is like milk sitting out in the sun. The scene switches to the creature locked inside a cage, sitting there next to 2 fools mocking it. The wild dragon jokes that the ugly thing looks like a giant eyeball. Meanwhile, the abyssal eye fires back, saying, "No way." He's a noble primordial creature from the abyss, and that fake, synthetic monster doesn't even compare. At the same time, Cheese explains that each of those containers holds one of these monsters. They're all frozen in cryo-sleep, but when he fired that hot weapon, it woke one up. So yeah, better keep locking the rest up tight. But Iso's curious because the symbol on that creature matched his mother's. Like, seriously, what kind of monster was your mom? That's wild. Alchemy really is something else. The protagonist still finds it odd since the only person he knew to get that symbol was Lucille herself. Cheese asks if he's read all the files yet. He should know about these beasts by now. Iso pauses, thinking, and says it's hard to remember. Perserad's archives had over 220 million records. Then suddenly it clicks. He recalls who else carried that symbol, the Supreme Sect. They were crazed fanatics obsessed with so-called divine power, turning their own souls into monstrous, grotesque bodies. According to his family's records, his mother wiped out the cult after killing nearly everyone. But as always, some survivors escaped to other dimensions. She points out there are still some wild alchemists out there doing unimaginable things, totally different from those guys. Iso admits he probably shouldn't have killed the house dog so fast. Then he turns and says they'll need to interrogate Garcia. Maybe she knows where those containers came from. Right away, it cuts to him asking exactly that. The elf shakes like she's having a meltdown, begging to be put out of her misery. Meanwhile, she's secretly annoyed, wondering just how that strange old guy managed to win over a beauty like her. Iso wastes no time and orders them to inject her with truth serum using a microparticle mist injector, no needles needed. The big rat jokes that the kid sure likes taking care of the ladies. The protagonist explains elves are allergic to synthetic materials, like certain metals, which is why needles are a no-go on them. But in the middle of that chat, the phone suddenly rings. The rat grabs it and says it's Mr. Iso grabs the phone, already bracing himself for another headache caused by Cheese, but Cheese tells him it's a call from that lady. Turns out it's Rennie. She sneaked a phone inside that teddy bear and wants to know if Iso misses her. Naturally, he just says no and asks her to explain why it's an emergency. She wonders if she's only allowed to call when something urgent's up. After all, she's his sponsor, so even without calls, he should be updating her daily. Right then, the rat lets out this wicked chuckle and smacks a button. Iso clears his throat and says, "The bunny phone is for emergencies, not small talk." Suddenly, Garcia's chain tightens or trembles, something like that, and she moans loudly. Rennie, startled, immediately asks whose voice that was and what's going on. Iso just drops the phone and starts choking the rat, telling him to quit messing up his life. Then he picks up the phone again, saying it was just Cheese pulling a dumb prank. He's got a ton of experiments waiting, so he asks her to cut to the chase. She mentions her father and says they'll meet at the EPAM theater on Sunday. Iso thanks her and promises to finalize everything before the operation. A bit later, Garcia stares blankly, totally confused. The rat admits she knows nothing about the containers, and Iso agrees. They'll have to figure out some other way to make her useful. According to records, the Emerald Elves were wiped out because they had an incredibly rare hypnosis magic, so potent that mages hunted them just to steal their eyes for experiments. The Perserad family captured many, but Iso is the first to trap one alive. She says, "Yeah, but she seems pretty determined to end her own life. They'll need to reprogram or condition this wild girl somehow." But Iso says no. He must have forgotten about Alpina's eyes. They were the emerald eyes of the queen. That artifact could link souls directly, and the Emerald Queen herself could command her entire race with a single gaze. Cheese immediately pipes up that it'd be an awesome experiment to see if Alpina can control Garcia through the emotional system they installed. Right then, he seats Alpina down and tells her to look into Garcia's eyes and say, "Obey Iso. If she does, she'll earn a couple of chocolate bars." Alpina eagerly grabs Garcia's face, but 2 hours later, her eyes are bloodshot and raw. Cheese points out that obviously, nothing's activating. Iso is puzzled. Since she can use the angel's eye, this should have worked. Then he has an idea. Just like with the angel's arm, she needs to be emotionally unstable or recall a painful memory to trigger it. He leans close to her ear and asks without missing a beat, "Where's your mother?" Instantly, her eyes flare up and Garcia reacts, grabbing her face. Then she says, "Those are the queen's eyes. Why does she have them?" But Iso couldn't care less. Everything is unfolding just as he planned, and he tells Alpina to issue the command. However, she's frozen, probably because Garcia is diving deep into all of Alpina's memories, seeing every moment between her and Isozo. The blonde girl and the green-haired one both stand there frozen. Garcia smiles, starts moving, and heads straight toward Iso, who's thrilled, exclaiming, "Hat! It actually worked." Then Garcia kneels before her master. Oddly enough, she places a hand on his head and tells him he can't just call her mom like that. Looking completely baffled, he turns to Alpina, demanding to know what she said to get this woman acting this way. But then Garcia's hand lands on his shoulder, pulling him into a hug, saying she knows he's been feeling lonely. From now on, Mommy's got him covered. Meanwhile, the big rat just stands there, utterly confused, wondering what bizarre roleplay he's walked into. The protagonist pushes Garcia away sharply, telling her to back off. His mom was the top alchemist of the Perserad family, not some basic experiment like her. Yet from the way Garcia looms over him, it's clear he's seeing his mother's face instead. He's totally disoriented, rubbing his eye. He warns the rat to be careful, don't take off his glasses or make eye contact. Then he orders him to toss a grenade, calls out for Alpina, but the rat says she's completely unresponsive. The protagonist figures that, like when she used the angel's arm, she's probably weakened by the item's effects. so he yells for the rat to hold Garcia down before she does anything else. He pulls the grenade pin, but at that exact moment, she rips off his glasses and locks eyes with him, and the poor guy collapses immediately. Garcia smirks, saying now that those two pests are gone, it's finally time to have some fun. Iso quickly puts his glasses back on, points his gun at her, and commands her to freeze, close her eyes, and stay put. But she just strolls on closer, grabs the barrel, presses it to her forehead, and taunts him. There's no way he'd shoot the mom he adores, right? When he looks at her through the lens, all he sees is his mother's face. She pulls off his glasses, telling him she always knew her sweet boy would never hurt her. Just like that, Iso falls right into the trap. He keeps muttering that she's not his mom, but it's already too late. He's out cold. She softly strokes his head, calling him a good boy as he starts smiling like a kid while she whispers she'll never leave his side again. Then the scene cuts to Lucille, who could have helped, wondering why Alpina was chosen for the experiment and not her. She's unstable, sure, but that weirdo shouldn't have been picked over her. At least Lucille feels confident about one thing. There's only one other person who's her rival on this base, that utterly useless girl. Just then, a flashback of the protagonist and Garcia hits her, and she immediately screams, "What's that? Who is that other woman?" Before she can say more, Iso slaps her hand away and tells her to show respect for his mother. Lucille is totally thrown off. What does he mean? His mother? Garcia then cups Lucille's face and asks if she likes Iso too. Furious, Lucille snaps that only she can call him that. But at the same time, Garcia activates some kind of power, forcing Lucille to drop whatever she was holding. The effect hits hard. She closes her eyes, and Iso lays her gently on the couch. But then Garcia, overwhelmed by the poison, knocks over a glass and collapses to the floor, her arms starting to corrode. The protagonist quickly grabs a viral suppression injection. He explains that, unfortunately, for it to work fastest, it has to be administered in the glute just like at the hospital. Yeah, you can already guess how awkward that's going to be. His face turns beet red as Garcia softly urges, "Mommy's scared of needles, so be gentle." What on earth is going on here? The chat's exploding with comments like, "This is straight out of a movie. What a disaster." Min's hesitating now. The needle inches closer, and as soon as it pokes in, she lets out a scream that echoes like a siren. I mean, who wouldn't yelp with something that loud? The main character warns that one shot might not cut it this time. She nods, understanding, but asks him to take it a bit easier on her. Meanwhile, her portrait seems to be silently witnessing this chaos as if its dignity is being trampled on. He mutters a quiet apology, while Garcia gently reassures him, "It's okay, sweetie. I know you're just looking after me." Then he sighs, "Oh boy, this whole thing's ridiculous." And that trinket hanging around his neck, called the heart of a purser, senses a mental disturbance creeping in. It triggers a shift from his right twin core, activating a mental shield around him. From the bed, Garcia, still caught in a weird haze, murmurs how her little boy has to take care of her because it hurts so bad. Inside his mind, he's scrambling to understand how he ended up in this mess. He remembers that Garcia's Jade ability shouldn't be able to mess with his memories. Maybe it's got something to do with the Queen's Eye inside Alpina. He figures the words used or how Alpina handled the command must have been totally off, and it's on him to fix it. He needs to wake Alpina up fast and undo whatever's twisted in Garcia's mind because something's definitely wrong here. Oh, now it clicks. Alpina used the Queen's Eye to trigger Garcia's eye and implant the idea that she was Iso's mother, basically ordering her to take care of him. That's the whole setup. Now Iso tells her to calm down, saying this act's gotta stop. But Garcia looks at him puzzled, wondering why the person's mental shield didn't flare up right away. Then she reaches for his hand, lying there all sad and huge, asking if he doesn't love mommy anymore. Seriously, he's pissed at her for playing that card, yet secretly acknowledges her soft body shares his mom's scent. Weird, right? He already cleansed the psychic muck from the Queen Elf's eye, so none of this should even be happening. Trying to take control, he says if she promises to obey from now on, he won't walk away. Garcia agrees, saying he can count on her. Mommy always listened to him. He snaps back, telling her to quit with the mommy act because he's a grown guy now. Also, she's never allowed to call him that sweetheart nickname again, under any circumstances. She needs to stick to his full name. Garcia nods but kneels down and asks if she can sneak in that nickname when they're alone. He agrees but warns if she breaks that once, it's a no-negotiation zone forever. She smiles and says, "Your mommy's boy has grown into such a strong, independent man." Then she adds that since no one's around, they should enjoy a hug and get some rest. Yep, that's definitely his soft spot. He's already giving in, thinking it's pointless to fight destiny. Sadly, everyone's conked out now. His polished shoes sit by the bed as she whispers she'll never leave him again, tracing a heart shape with her hand. He hasn't got a clue what just went down, thank goodness. But now Garcia is officially on the roster of folks caught snoozing on the job. Lucille points a finger at him, demanding to know what in the world just went down. This whole thing turned out to be a total train wreck. The main guy says there's nothing he can do about it. She's got a memory connection supercharged by a psychic system wired through maternal genes, linked by some kind of nerve loop. Whatever it was, it basically made it impossible for him to resist. Cheese chimes in, also, it's already morning. We've still got important business to take care of, he continues. They need to rescue the 1,000 Birds unit, the Chidori girls who work down on Red Light Street. Honest workers, as he calls them. The main guy goes, wait, Cheese, you're actually serious about saving those fools. The rat says it's both bizarre and hilarious, and that while they have countless creatures around, not a single person is available to help clean up the mess. They're in desperate need of backup. Of course, Iso falls for the simplest pitch: ever more women at the base. He figures that with a bunch more girls around, the place might finally get tidied up. Then the scene cuts to a dorm room in the Demon Realm's barracks, late at night. One of those honest workers is working hard while a guy lounges, complaining that the price of spiral corpses has jumped 5-fold this month. The long-nosed man mentions their boss supposedly delivered the Emerald Phantom to the Red Light District, and a gang called 1,000 Birds is handling distribution. If they manage to control that product, they'd be set for life. Another guy raises his hand, asking, wait, where's the boss? He's been gone for hours. Shouldn't he be back by now? The man smacks the well-dressed worker on the backside and tells her to check the bathroom. Suddenly, the lights go out. The woman freezes mid-task and says something just fell on the table. The guy lights a match and sees the boss's corpse with a symbol marked on his forehead. It's the emblem of the city's number 7 hero of the night, the Arbiter. Right away, the guy grabs Yuzi, shouting that the freak's here. The fat guy starts shaking violently, blood streaming from every pore. Another hides, terrified, when a hand lands on his shoulder. When he turns around, it's one of the girls, all twisted and transformed. The man panics and empties his entire magazine into her without a second thought. Moments later, gunfire and chaos fill the place. When the dust settles, only the street worker is left alive, begging for her life and insisting she had nothing to do with the drugs. She's barely breathing, trembling as a gigantic eye appears behind her and creeps closer, calling her a filthy parasite leeching off misery and saying she deserves to die. But this time, the final call is up to her. The next chapter opens with the rain pouring down all over the city. A girl steps out of a car, muttering that it's really coming down out there, and that her files are going to get soaked. Her name's Yan Yifeng, assistant to the director of the Black Veil District. The taxi driver looks on edge, asking what's going on. When she turns to check, she drops everything in shock. Inside the district HQ, all those drug cartel guys are lying dead. Reporters swarm the scene, pointing out the mark of the city's number 7 mega hero. Now the big question spreading through the public like wildfire is, when darkness falls and chaos takes over, who's really watching over the city? The council? The corrupt officers? The merchants? Nope. The people have already made up their minds. It's clear who they really trust. There he is, the angel hiding in the shadows, delivering justice to the wicked. The Night Arbiter hero who claims this city for the Purser family, warning that until he returns, no pests are allowed to mess with it. But where did this luminescent stranger come from? And how does he tie into the Pursards? The scene flips again, showing the Chidori girls in the hospital, all covered in blood. Seriously though, can someone get these girls a shower already? Oh wait, he hadn't healed them yet, just used that thing that keeps the body intact without fixing everything. Now, they're all inside capsules while the main character goes through the files. She tells him not to stress. Both of them want to save all the girls and keep them alive. But for her to join their team, she'd have to give up all her independence willingly. From then on, her identity, soul, and everything else would belong to the Perserad family. Seeing her 3 friends like this, Phoenix agrees. The rat wastes no time telling her to take a shower and get into the uniform. Poor Phoenix just nods, resigned. The outfit's folded neatly in the corner, and as she heads to the shower, she can't help but remember how she once swore off relying on any man. Yet here she is, right back where she started, and it all feels like a bad joke. After her bath, she grabs the clothes and notices the silk in the stockings or whatever they are is made of a super rare fabric that costs 5,000 gold bars. Even when she was pulling in a lot of cash, she never had the guts to splurge on anything that pricey. We've already had a spoiler showing that by the end of the month, Izuzo's going to give Cheese a serious talking to. Each pair of stockings cost 5,000, and he bought 40 pairs. The diligent worker puts on the stockings, slips into the tiny shoes, and eyes the collar. She recalls Cheese saying it's a 5th-generation alchemy restriction collar. Once it's around her neck, her mind and emotions will be tracked and controlled by the Perserad heart. It can instantly trigger effects, like injecting dragon toxin or even delivering an electric shock. And if her emotions spiral too much, the system will activate soul destruction alchemy, turning her into a heartless puppet. Yeah, that's pretty harsh. Still, determined to save her friends, she puts the collar on without blinking. And with that, she's all set. Bioalchemy crafted the division's silver phoenix coat, codenamed Alpha. Talk about style, this uniform looks amazing. He's grinning, praising the design, saying it's perfect and custom-tailored just for her, and theoretically fits her curves just right. The protagonist immediately grabs him, telling him to cut it out. Alpha, that's her new title now, chimes in that she wants to pitch in too. But Iso warns her, resurrection-based alchemy classified under Perserad is top secret. He can't let anyone see it. Alpha insists that since she's already wearing the collar, she's basically part of the Perserad family now, so no worries there. Iso nods and says, well, at least that rat's good for something. The rat proudly replies, of course, I'm the most loyal one around. Iso agrees, saying, fine. Then promotes her to second assistant and adds, well, it's just me. Or maybe that uniform looks a little snugger now, she says. Yes, understood, my master. But as Iso quickly pipes up, no one around here calls me master. Here, the proper way to address me is my lord. She nods in agreement. Poor gal has to humble herself completely, but Iso thanks her anyway. In the lab, Iso passes the notebook over to the rat, telling him to double-check every ingredient and make sure everything is safe. They're working on biochemistry for revival purposes. The rat wonders if it's really just about injecting Azoth into the spine. After reviewing the entire plan, he's curious why Iso won't use Azoth 03. Iso explains it's because they can't afford to waste something as rare as the essence of life on these girls. Even refining a tiny 40mm dose of Azoth costs about 100 tons of gold to produce that final compound using nearly all the Azoth left by his mother plus every penny he'd saved. And that's not all. Even though they made a fortune from the Huntmaster, refining Azoth is insanely complicated and super time-consuming. He just can't justify burning through the last of the AO on this base. If Alpenia or Lucille ever get into trouble, they'd be totally out of options. She says she understands, but this plan Iso's cooking up isn't your average surgery. It's more like a biotech experiment that's never been tried on humans before straight-up madness. Still, IOC stays cool and says not to sweat it. He's run through the simulation hundreds of times in his head, so it should be safe. Plus, if it works, they'll gain way more control over future trials. The rat is already sold, saying a whole squad of these special girls would be seriously impressive. The very first to go through the negative life transmutation is Experiment 001, Raven, now codenamed Crow. They're using the theories of the dead paradox and the inverse life equation. On top of that, they added nether essence, which flows through the soul materialization corridor inside the life reactor. Woo, that's some heavy-duty science. Meanwhile, poor Alpha is standing there completely terrified. The protagonist tells her not to worry. He knows these theories like the back of his hand. Both the dead paradox and life inversion are straight from his mother's research. She dove deep into studies from the Necromancer clan, so this is top-tier, cutting-edge tech. Alpha asks if he's using Death Cry, the scary Necromancer family line. The protagonist says no, because their creations always turn into creatures hooked on devouring everything. His mom developed a second generation of the tech. The only downside was that people lost all their memories. That's when he created his own version by adding a soul corridor to bring back past memories. Now, by mixing soul magic, the family's soul corridor, structure, and blood from the experiments, the success rate skyrocketed. The rat reports that the other unit is fully charged and everything's stable. Iso immediately orders to start and pushes the button. Alpha offers to help, but he replies, no, maybe next time. Suddenly, a green liquid pours into the tank and floods Crow's body. Energy levels stay steady, and she's expected to revive in about 10 seconds. When the countdown hits 1, her eyes slowly open and she wakes up. Alpha gets emotional, but Iso tells her to hold it together. Crow needs to stay inside the chamber for 2 weeks to stabilize her new form. After that, she'll be reborn as an immortal being, forever young. Then he tells Alpha to get ready because they're moving on to the next experiment. This time, it's the strong one, Falcon. She's undergoing black alchemy through the ritual of impure blood. The rat notices he's using a werewolf transformation ritual to make her immortal, calming the fury in her bloodline by blending it with a bird-type lineage to rebuild it. Finally, he'll add the bloodline of the Saho werewolves' ferocious companions who once served the goddess Ciso. The rat says he gets all that, but asks why he's including monarch butterfly power that basically restricts her growth. Ciso says the reason is pretty clear. He despises big dogs. Plus, he threw in the butterfly trait, so her fur won't grow too large when she transforms, since hairy dogs are gross and would mess up the whole lab. The rat complains that makes no sense. If he hates dogs that much, why not just do the same process as Crow? The answer? Every president of the association has to have at least one werewolf pet. It's a tradition from his mother. He says that tradition won't be repeated, then walks away. She stays there, wondering if poor Refer will lose it when she turns into that tiny dog. He tells Alpha to say something, but she just replies that if her friend ever came back to life, anything, no matter how weird, would be a true blessing. The protagonist says she's really sharp and tells her she'll help with the equipment once everything begins. Meanwhile, he wonders why Alpina and that stubborn Lucille can't be this cooperative. The rat, however, wants to know what exactly he's planning. Iso explains the third experiment requires Sierra's wedding dress. Sierra, the Bandit of Hearts. He has to steal it from the secret exhibit hall along with the soul-weakening field. But the rat's terrified. He backs all the way to the far side of the room, saying no way is he going to fetch that thing. Any woman brought back with it wouldn't even be recognizable as a woman anymore. Iso tells him to bring it now, or else he'll stash it in the rat's bedroom that very night. The poor guy freaks out, saying, "That's just cruel." Sometime later, the machine is ready to revive dear Falcon. Alpha is impressed. She's so young, yet she's handling incredibly complex alchemy equipment. There's something strangely familiar about her. She recalls a brother named Gaul who used to make shoes and clothes for her. Well, just look at the outfit he crafted this time. True craftsmanship from a hardworking soul. Suddenly, Falcon feels something growing. A tail, apparently, and the protagonist announces that the procedure is complete. Alpha unexpectedly steps forward and plants a quick kiss on his cheek, leaving him speechless. She apologizes, flustered, saying she got emotional since he brought her back to life and lost control briefly. The truth is, it was kind of an automatic reaction, something she used to do whenever her brother finished his work. The protagonist warns her to be super careful with that. If Lucille ever saw anything like this, there'd be chaos for sure. He also tells her to stop reading into things. He isn't saving anyone out of kindness. He just wants to advance his alchemy. Alpha nods in understanding, then gently wipes the sweat from his forehead, telling him he should rest before the third experiment. Isil insists he's fine. He has stamina potions but wonders if maybe he's been pushing her training a little too hard. She's unnervingly obedient, or maybe she's up to something else. The third experiment kicks off with that cursed dress. The woman's name was Kin Neo and Dan. Honestly, that thing looked downright terrifying. Cheese is fiddling with some portable device, trying to trap the dress inside a containment barrier. A scissor snaps at him, telling him to stop acting like an idiot. To capture that thing, the suppression level has to be maxed out. He's already had his mind corrupted 3 separate times. You'd think he'd have learned by now. But the rat refuses, saying if he cranks it to max, he won't be able to check out the demon girl's legs. As scary as she is, her body is top-notch. Iso scolds him, warning he's practically asking to get picked off by that monster. Still, the soul suppression field is pushed to its absolute limit. The matrix seal kicks in, and the suspension process starts for Chimao. Right away, the protagonist orders the dress to be activated. The top chamber opens and the cursed gown slowly lowers onto her body. Her whole figure begins glowing red, while Alpha and Cheese watch in shock. She's thrashing around wildly. Alpha, clearly confused, asks if Kin Neo is okay. The protagonist confirms she is. The screaming indicates the power transfer is going perfectly. That's exactly the point of this resurrection. The dress keeps tightening until suddenly, a strange red mist fills the entire room. Iso can't see a thing, but notes that all the monitor readings remain stable. He tells the rat to turn on the ventilation so they can get some visibility. The smoke starts to clear slowly, but even after an hour, visibility hasn't improved. Finally, he says, "Cheese, go check out what's happening." But the rat bolts out in a panic, yelling that Isizo should go instead. The protagonist replies that he can't. Since he's the lead on the experiment, he can't get personally involved. That's when Alpha volunteers, saying she'll go since the girl's her sister. He's helped her fix tons of problems before, so now she wants to return the favor. Iso looks at her and asks if she seriously thinks he'd mess up an experiment like this. He praises her loyalty, but reminds her to trust her master more. After all, he is the greatest alchemist of this century. Alpha blushes a bit and just says okay, though she can't help wondering why her master is so cool and kind. Honestly, she might actually be starting to crush on him. The protagonist opens the capsule and steps inside. Radiation levels are high, but his protective cloak should keep him safe. He asks the rat how far he's reading, but the rat says he has no clue. The protagonist tells him to check the thermal scan, and the rat replies the entire room shows up as one heat source. Isizo finds that odd, and suddenly, a sharp static noise blasts through his headset, startling Cheese. The rat grabs the mic and yells, asking if Io can still hear him. Alpha immediately volunteers to go in. Waiting idly won't help him, but the rat insists she stay put. She argues this is crazy, but he warns her. If Isizo went in alone, that means he already has a plan. Intervening now will only make things worse. Besides, Ezo is a first-rate alchemist. Theoretically, nothing born this century could take him down. Inside, the protagonist starts noticing it's becoming harder to breathe, even though oxygen levels should be normal. His cloak should handle that easily, and he realizes the fog itself is eating away at the cloak from the outside in. In just seconds, it's crumbling apart. Before he even has a chance to react, he's lying shirtless on the ground, hooked up to dozens of wires. Out of the swirling red mist, something begins to take form, and there she is, wearing that cursed wedding dress, horns sprouting from her head, demonic wings, and a dragon's tail. Honestly, the girl's got flair. She even shoots him a look that's equal parts warning and allure. Meanwhile, the scene cuts to Ray lying in bed, missing him like crazy. She's dreaming, saying if he popped the question right now, she'd say yes in a heartbeat. But at that exact moment, Iso is actually proposing to Chino. The rat and Alpha freeze in shock. Cheese even sneaks a quick photo. Then Kino starts conjuring a ring in her hand, saying once it slides onto his finger, he officially becomes her husband. The rat's baffled. How on earth does she already have a ring ready? She slides it onto his finger and declares that from here on out, he belongs to her forever, and betrayal is absolutely forbidden. The Ratcher stares, thinking. Of course, falling for Dyseria's charms, a demoness of love and temptation, is totally unavoidable. But deep down, I'm boiling mad. Damn it, Iso. If I'd known it'd end like this, I would have gone in first. Meanwhile, Alpha can't fathom how this resurrection ritual suddenly morphed into a wedding. The boy's barely old enough for this kind of thing. Then the ring on Azo's finger begins to glow, pulsing waves of deep red energy around him, and a full outfit materializes. Of course, it's a tuxedo, and wow, the design is seriously on point. At this point, all you can do is accept this ridiculous turn of events. Hino grins and says now that he's wearing her ring, it's his move to throw something back her way. Calm as ever, the protagonist tells Cheese to get that ring ready. Cheese, utterly confused, asks which one he means. Aya replies, the one locked away in the private vault, code 15464. Cheese hesitates, then goes, ah, got it. Thinking this is about to turn into a full-blown soap opera. The scene shifts again to Lucille, bored out of her mind. She's been stuck here 2 days thanks to that pesky rat and is totally over this whole ride. The dumb blonde has vanished, and it's just her and that chubby elf now. Yeah, that elf is seriously round. While the elf cooks, Lucille fumes, watching her shimmy her hips in that outfit. She really shouldn't be allowed anywhere near Azizo. Garcia offers some of the food she made, but Lucille says she's not interested until the smell hits her nose. It actually smells amazing. She snatches a bite, suspecting maybe the woman's trying to poison her. But honestly, there's no poison deadlier than Lucille herself. Right amid all that, Cheese strolls by acting all sneaky. Lucille immediately notices and wonders what he's up to. She tails him down the hallway, watching as he approaches a painting of the protagonist's mother. He presses an alchemy symbol carved into the mountain scene. Suddenly, a hidden door swings open. The rat slips into Iso's secret equipment chamber. Lucille observes carefully, thinking Iso must be completely paranoid to build a hidden room inside an already secret base. The rat heads to Unit 15464, scans the rogue key, and the system starts announcing something about a black fertilizer protocol, confirming the identity of Cheese, the ever-helpful assistant of Iso and a self-proclaimed pervert. The rat curses, grumbling that whoever programmed this system must be a total idiot. Suddenly, every security weapon turns toward him, demanding an apology. Then, the testing sequence kicks off. First up, answer a bunch of alchemy-related questions. Next, perform a specific dance routine. Then, take down a few energy worms. By the 10th test, he has to confess his 10 most embarrassing moments while hooked up to a lie detector. Then, out of nowhere, a little card pops out delivering the item along with a hologram of Isizo laughing, saying he was just messing around and filming the whole thing. A little later, the item lands in the protagonist's hands, and he commends the rat on a job well done. He then slips the ring onto Kin and Neo's arm, but the rat notices something strange. Daiso is grinning in a pretty odd way. Maybe the demon's charm didn't actually work on him after all. And wow, Kim Neo's design is wild. She's practically glowing, completely enchanted by the ring. Meanwhile, outside, Lucille, who's been trailing Cheese, wonders what's going on. That rat's definitely scheming against Isizo. Why else would he sneak into his secret room? She bursts in, yelling for Isizo not to worry, but freezes when she sees him proposing to China and Neo. Instantly, she activates her powers, shouting that there's no way he's marrying anyone else. She'll devour every last one of them and erase that parasite. Isizo tells her to stop and says the Perserad family doesn't waste time on silly things like marriage, but Lucille points out that he literally just put a ring on the demon's finger. Right then, a glowing magic circle appears beneath Kino. Iso explains it's actually a mini version of his suppression matrix, a containment device he made for smaller creatures, which just happened to be perfect for this situation. With it, he managed to weaken the power of the woman in the wedding dress. The crazy part is that the experiment works so well. She can now completely break down and rebuild her physical form, which even surprised him. That meant his suppression field was useless, which is why he pretended to be captured in the first place. The rat praises him, saying it was a clever move because capturing a smoke-made woman would have been nearly impossible. Lucille says she gets it, but demands he take off that ring right now to prove it isn't real. Iso agrees, tries to pull it off, but it's stuck like glue. He tugs harder, baffled. Cheese quickly grabs a saw, joking it's fine, he'll just saw off the finger, like a thank you for everything they've been through. But Kino calmly says no tricks will work. That ring is the physical symbol of her love, so removing it is totally impossible. Even if the whole dimension collapsed, that ring would still exist forever. And as long as it stays on his finger, she'll always be his wife. She shoots him a dark, intimidating look, warning that since he's not behaving like a good husband, she'll just have to get a little more persuasive. Suddenly, the ring starts to glow, and Iso demands to know how she's using her powers if her alchemy is sealed. Inside, energy spreads wildly as Lucille pounds on the door, yelling at that blasted rat to get in there and fix this now. She's about to tear that woman apart when suddenly, both of them freeze in shock. A bed suddenly appears right in the center of the room. Hino smirks, admiring that his complex, ironic alchemy really is something else, but he adds that it's not going to save him this time. She loosens one of the straps on her dress, saying everything's changed now, and then his hand moves on its own, controlled by the ring. She greets him with a sly smile, saying, "It's finally time to seal the deal." Lucille yells for the rat to open the door, insisting she's going in. But then Iso's whole expression shifts. He suddenly says, "Enough with this charade." And what happens next? The entire wedding dress starts to dissolve. He went all out. Iso explains that whatever power was left in Daiseria's cursed gown wasn't really strong. Sure, her little tricks looked flashy, but honestly, they were nothing special. He presses a button, and the whole transformation reverses itself. Finally, some relief. The boy's safe. Thankfully, the protagonist just looks at her, saying there's no way Iso is losing to one of his own experiments. Lucille covers her face, yelling at him not to stare at that gross body. Then the scene shifts to the city. Our dear Babapoli is strolling around, commenting that the food here is absolutely delicious. She thanks the officer for the recommendation, and he asks why she keeps calling him officer when she already knows his name. She says it's because he's always tagging along. Plus, his name, Tang Kang, is kinda tricky to pronounce, so she prefers something simpler. He just thinks to himself her name's the weirder one, but whatever. Then he asks why she picked him as her assistant when there are plenty of others at the base. She leans on him and says she did her homework. He's the only one at the base who's never had a romantic partner, and teasing him is just way too easy. Poor guy is in for a rough day. Back at the base, Lucille tries on another outfit, and honestly, this design is way better than last time. The protagonist is checking receipts, then they go out to dinner again. He pays the bill, and she asks for a ring. He drops a pile of cash right there, telling her they've been out all day, so she better be happy. He also tells her to forget about the ring for now because eventually, he'll find a way to get it off. Lucille says it would have been a perfect day if that stubborn blonde hadn't tagged along the whole time. The protagonist just tells her she needs to deal with it. Two high-risk experiments like them both need constant supervision, he says. Then, as a treat, he's taking them to a fancy shopping mall. The girls get all excited, saying the place is huge. Once inside, he tells them to stay put and not wander off. He grabs a cart and says they can put anything they want in it, but the one rule is no jumping inside the cart. Of course, the moment he says that, both of them hop right in. Iso sighs, saying those brats are just embarrassing him. And clearly, everyone nearby is staring, too. Meanwhile, Tang Kang tells Babapoli it doesn't even make sense for them to be there. It's not part of their job. But she totally ignores him, telling him to just enjoy his candy. He keeps complaining, saying this is irresponsible and that she doesn't care about the city's safety. But she tells him to chill out. Just standing behind a desk won't stop any crimes. He fires back, saying apparently her idea of solving crimes is just going out and having fun. He's totally caught off guard when she suddenly asks if he really believes that weird kid and that odd little rat are just chilling at home, sitting on stacks of cash, doing nothing. He asks if she means they're going to actually spend it, and she goes, "Duh, yeah, of course they will. Like, who just lets that kind of money gather dust?" He argues this mall is the biggest one in the whole city. There's no chance they'd show up here of all places, but she says she's already studied the local maps and tracked their recent moves, and she's pretty sure they live near the market district. So if they're out shopping, that's exactly the spot they'd hit. He admits that makes sense, but still doubts he'd randomly run into them while wandering a store. And wouldn't you know it, right then, who strolls up in front of them? Bavapolia pulls candy out of her mouth with this smug little grin. They pass by, and the guy instantly recognizes them too, whispering that they need to call for backup right now. But she orders everyone to freeze and keep munching their candies. That's an order. She wants to handle this herself. Meanwhile, Isizo's stuck by the cheese aisle, clearly annoyed the rat made him buy all this stuff, while the guy stayed home babysitting Lucille. He casually tosses some cheese into the cart, pretty chill about it, until suddenly someone points something at his head, telling him to stay perfectly still. The protagonist shoots back that he's no kid, he's Perserad. The woman introduces herself as Babopolia, the new head of security for this area. She says he should actually be thanking her. Without him taking down Rumir, she never would have landed this job. She quickly realizes he's trying to turn that into a threat and says she knows all about the girl next to him, the one who helped paralyze the whole city 4 years ago. Iso admits she's pretty well informed, but warns her to drop it before the whole mall turns into a disaster. Babopolia says sadly he's just raising strong people, but none of them are very smart. She tosses a handful of arcade claw machine tickets into the air, and weirdly enough, both girls seem totally hooked on them, probably while he's stuck being held up here. Meanwhile, those two are off having a blast, especially since each super coupon gives 50 tries. No surprise, they're at the arcade now, trying to snag a little bird plushie from the claw machine. Lucille loses it, yelling at the blonde to move aside. It's her turn now. The protagonist, still locked in a stare down with Babopolia, calls her delusional. Without those two girls, her situation would be way worse. But underneath it all, he's boiling with frustration. How can they be so powerful and yet so incredibly careless? He tightens his glove, revealing a small gadget on his arm that shoots out paralyzing venom. He promises she'll be down in seconds, but out of nowhere, she's right beside him, snatching his weapon out of reach and snapping a pair of cuffs on him. And if that wasn't bad enough, she chains herself to him too, saying now she can be sure he won't try to run. To top it all off, Iso notices the cuffs are enchanted, and there it is, a tiny heart reflection in her eyes. Seriously, he wonders if every woman in this world has some kind of charm power. Can a guy get a break for like 1 second? Right then, those two goofs at the arcade finally manage to grab the bird plush, but of course, the claw drops it. Lucille snaps and punches the machine, smashing it completely. At that exact moment, Iso's necklace, designed to block mental effects, activates. Babopolia jumps, startled. An announcement blares out that someone's messing up the machines. She quickly lets go of Iso, saying she'll catch him later. For now, he needs to go handle those two troublemakers. But just as she moves, she freezes in place. A scorpion is crawling up her neck. She's baffled, while Iso calmly tells her to hold on. As the critter crawls onto his arm, he warns that if she took even 1 more second to remove the cuff, she would have gotten a lethal dose of poison. He tells her to stop chasing him because she doesn't stand a chance. Babopolia tells him to quit stalling and save the girls who are ruining everything. He just walks right past her, telling her not to look back or they'll need a new director by tomorrow. She just stares at him, totally starstruck. Meanwhile, the main guy dashes off, wondering where that wild woman disappeared to. Now he has to scold the two idiots who broke the machine and stole a bunch of birds. He warns them none of them will get any sleep tonight, and there will be plenty of time to regret what they did. Alpha pleads for mercy. Keeping them up all night is harsh, the rat says. Next time, just call him. He's a pro with claw machines. Alpha mentions his pockets were all shiny, and oh, there was a grenade from Battleia. He panics, tosses it up, and it explodes right in the middle of the chaos. The girls ask if he's okay. He says he's fine, the smoke wasn't toxic, but he definitely looks rattled. Cut to Tang Kang, asking why she let him slip away. She grabs her loose robe and tells him to hang it on the headboard, but when she looks over, she spots a photo. None other than that rich kid from the previous story. It seems like he was the first president of Gordon City. Meanwhile, Babopolia is chilling in the bath, calm as ever, already gearing up to hunt down the main guy. She smiles, thinking Iso Perserad holds the power to completely shake up Gordon's order, maybe even toppling the whole hierarchy. He apparently smells just like her uncle. Her master plan is to steal this rebellious kid's attention and steer him in the right direction, so the city can go back to her uncle's golden era. That's the only way to bring safety and happiness for everyone. Back at the base, after the grenade explosion, some numbers suddenly appear floating in the air. Iso immediately recognizes them as an encrypted ultra-frequency radio signal. Alpha looks just as confused as I am, not completely sure what it means. The rat explains those are signals only the government uses, basically impossible to trace. The weird part is that since she passed that info along, it means they can now eavesdrop on official government communications. She quickly asks, Aso, what did you do with that new director for her to hand over such a crucial code? Iso finds it strange. She slipped it into his pocket without saying a word. Even stranger, if she worked behind the scenes to make it happen. The rat says he'll grab a radio so they can listen in, but Poto worries. What if it's a trap? What if she uses a reverse ultra-frequency locator to connect to the base and locate their position? The rat tells him to chill, she doesn't have that kind of tech. Still, Iso is anxious. He tells them to get his device, and the guy fetches an ultra-advanced radio receiver Iso built that's untraceable with a range of roughly 8,000 kilometers. Suddenly, someone shoves a kiwi into his mouth. It's Garcia. He tells the woman not to interfere, but she's also holding a watermelon, saying she saw on a channel that those fruits are great for staying healthy. He just tells her to back off and gently pushes her aside. He decides to buckle down and focus on work, but when he looks around, everyone's already gobbling up the fruit like it's the last piece of pizza at a party. So, he puts the two in a squat punishment, but he knows that won't cut it, he needs stricter discipline. Then, he chooses to zero in on fine-tuning the frequency Babapolia gave them. He orders Ches to stay completely silent. Things are about to get seriously interesting. They catch someone singing about a frog that leaps into a river and finds sticky grits. Turns out it's Baba chilling in the bath, with her little toy frog bobbing beside her, soaking in every word. She asks what those little troublemakers from Gordon are scheming this time. The rat snatches up the communicator, threatening to tear into her, but Iso swoops in and yanks it away, curious about what that shady cop is actually after. She calmly tells him not to get so riled up. She just wants to take him out on a date. The main guy looks totally baffled, and before he can respond, Lucille snatches the communicator right out of his hand and threatens to curse that witch with flesh-melting magic for even trying to flirt with her master. Babapolia totally brushes her off, while Alpina hauls Lucille away before she does any real damage. Isizo warns Babapolia she'll regret messing with these little games, but she says she already knows he plans to strike at the heart of the Karuming family, and she's actually interested in lending a hand. Then, out of nowhere, she asks, "By the way, why'd you put that frog there?" The scene cuts to Tang Kang, who insists it's way too risky for her to go alone. Those guys are hardcore criminals with over 100 offenses each, but she shoots back, saying from now on, his code name is Pest-01. He needs to realize that, given the right circumstances, even pests can turn out to be pretty useful. Like, for example, using swarms of locusts to clear out other bugs that wreck pastures. Meanwhile, back at base, the rat says it's nuts for him to go on that so-called date just to grab a burger. And not just any burger, the very best in the whole city. That means she already knows the area like the back of her hand. He asks who he's taking tomorrow, Lucille or Alpina. The main guy says neither. They only stirred up chaos last time, and it wouldn't look good on him. That's why tomorrow, the Silver Phoenix, their beloved Alpha, will be the one going. Alpha hesitates, asking if he's sure she's the right pick, but she's clearly flustered and says she's honored to stand by her master's side. She's just worried she might mess things up. He tells her not to sweat it. Nothing like that will happen. The scene cuts to the lower section of the base, where he heads over to an alchemy tank. From it emerges something that looks like a block of ice or maybe metal. Alpha asks what it is, and he explains it's cryos, not chiropractor cryo, as in cold. It's an ultra-tough, super low-temperature metal he crafted through alchemy. Then he tells her to lift her skirt. She freezes in confusion, wondering if he's finally decided to get a bit mean after being so kind until now. She hesitates, but he says if she wants to be chief maid, she's got to learn obedience. So, she begrudgingly complies, saying she'll pretend she's a curious kid learning about the world. He jumps back, startled, yelling at her to put it down. He didn't mean that part, he just wanted her to lift the back part where she keeps her feathers. She does, still looking puzzled. Then he shows her how just touching the new silver metal to her old feathers makes them shatter instantly. Alpha is stunned, something she put so much effort into was destroyed in a flash. He explains that he carefully analyzed its makeup. The weapon was made from a blend of 57% myethyl mixed with carbon and other elements, making it a top-tier tool, but still, it couldn't hold a candle to the ones he crafted himself. She asked what would happen if that metal actually touched human skin. He explained that since humans are mostly made of carbon, a single touch would feel like getting hit by an instant freeze spell. She cautioned him to be careful, but he assured her that his gloves cancel out any special material effects, even extreme cold. She wondered if he made this to fight some ridiculously powerful enemy. He nodded, saying it was designed to take on lava dragons. Then we flash back to when Cheese was griping about how fast the ice in his drink melted. That's when they invented the metal ice cubes, tiny steel blocks that could keep a drink perfectly cold forever. The catch? If just a bit of it touched your mouth, you'd freeze solid instantly. He told her he planned to forge a new set of feathers with this material, but to handle them correctly, she'd have to go through intense cold resistance training. As usual, the girls started imagining all kinds of weird stuff, and Alpha joked that it'd be embarrassing to stay frozen all day. She got a little confused, realizing he was talking about ice cream. He warned her not to underestimate how dangerous ice cream can really be. For a normal human like her, this was perfect beginner-level training. It might look harmless, but if she devoured enough, it'd start freezing her from the inside out, mimicking the feather's effect. Those feathers pierce the cells and freeze them from within. Alpha said she got it but didn't seem entirely convinced. The scene shifted to Chino. Well, now she goes by Katanori, which honestly sounds way cooler, opening her eyes as bright beams of light rose around her. By this time, Alpha had already eaten all the ice cream and said her brain seriously felt like it was freezing up. Iso told her 5 servings wasn't even close to the limit, so she had to keep going no matter the pain. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the base. Katanori had escaped from her containment. They bolted to the elevator and raced through the hallways toward room 705. When they arrived, she was nowhere to be found. Iso found it odd, the capsule was intact, and the rat pointed out the glass around it hadn't been damaged either. Alpha asked where she might have gone, and Iso reminded everyone she was still wearing the alchemy collar he gave her. He checked her location and froze. She was in area F22. When they got there, she was just chilling and playing with a wild dragon, bright red, tail wagging like a happy puppy. Kanori waved with a grin, wearing his main outfit, and asked when he planned to tell her he had such adorable pets. She shouted that the dragon was extremely dangerous, but secretly, he was proud because the main outfit he designed looked perfect on her. The rat explained the dragon was a descendant of the 6-winged fire dragon Razin. His name was Rosani, and he'd been raising him since birth, which explained why the creature was so friendly. Iso, however, was losing patience. He grabbed her hand, activating the ring on her finger. A transmutation circle appeared above them, and moments later, she was firmly restrained right before him. He told her the dragon wasn't her toy, and that the whole husband thing was just a side effect from the dress of malice. They had zero relationship, and she needed to remember she was nothing more than a maid. Wow, Iso really put her in her place. Alpha agrees, telling Katanori that since the master brought her back to life, she really shouldn't be acting like that. But then, out of nowhere, a tear slips down Iso's cheek. The rat asks what's going on, and honestly, he's not quite sure. He just feels off. Alpha points out his glove, which starts glowing. When he takes it off, he notices the ring pulsing with a faint aura. He wonders if there's some secret feature he didn't know about. Kazunori explains it's an emotional connection. When she feels sad, he feels it right along with her. Iso insists those feelings are just leftover impulses from the demon queen Sierra. He's not her fiancé, so those emotions aren't real. Kotonori agrees that the dress influenced her, but also says she inherited a whole bunch of Sierra's memories. Still, she isn't that woman. The reason she sees him as her husband is because he bravely entered Sierra's soul mirage to save her. That soul mirage was the purest expression of a demon's essence, the raw physical form of its primal instincts. The red mist she controls causes anyone stepping inside to merge with her very essence. Yeah, to merge with her, and if you're not compatible, your body ends up ripped apart from within. Your heart literally torn in two. That's her way of choosing who sticks by her side. So if he survived, it means they're totally compatible. Iso realizes this emotional link is going to be a huge headache. Then out of nowhere, Cheese pipes up, saying he can make her obey. But on 2 conditions. He wants 5,000 kilos of gold to spend however he likes, and Iso can't ask how he'll pull it off. Iso just nods in agreement. Cheese leans in close to Kotonori, whispers something in her ear, and she grins. She turns to Iso and says she'll accept being his maid, but only if she gets to be head maid. Whoa, she just threw down the gauntlet at Alpha's feet for a one-on-one challenge. The protagonist stays quiet, but Alpha steps right up, looking Kotonori straight in the eye. She reminds her who the real master is and tells her to stop stirring up trouble. Kotonori fires back that she's not the same girl anymore. Besides, this isn't just some casual contest. She's the strongest maid around here. Alpha doesn't look thrilled, tightens her fists briefly, then relaxes, agreeing that if Katanori wants the position, she's got to earn it. But once she's head maid, she'll be responsible for everyone and serving the master properly. Katanori looks puzzled, saying that's not how Big Sister usually acts. Usually, she's way more competitive. Can't believe a uniform turned her so obedient. But Phoenix thinks about all the master has already done for them and doesn't want to fan any flames of hatred or fighting. She's not wasting energy fighting over who gets to be captain. The protagonist then stands up and says, "Yup, the head maid should be the most powerful one. We'll settle this soon with an official duel, and whoever wins takes the title." She's obviously pumped. He jokes it'd be more fun if all the maids joined in, making a full ranking. Kotonori grins, saying she can't wait to crush her big sister. Later, Iso asks why the rat had to turn it into a full ranking in the first place. The sly guy replies, "What's wrong with having all the maids battle it out in the uniforms I designed? It's gonna be perfect." Iso asks if he's sure Kotonori won't cause trouble even if she loses. She agrees at first, then suddenly freezes up, asking if Iso really believes Alpha can take down a girl who inherited the powers of a demon lord. Even with those special feathers Iso gave her, it seems impossible. But Iso stands firm, saying he has zero doubts. Her weapons are only running at 5% power, and she totally stands a chance to beat Kodori. Fast forward 3 days, and we see the poor girl, once so strong and muscular, now struggling as if being strangled. Wait, actually, looks like she's reliving her time in the Hell Hound unit. Suddenly, she snaps awake. Oh man, she's already clad in a maid outfit. Crow wakes up beside her tube, telling her she must have been trapped in a nightmare. Falcon gets up, mentioning she dreamed about that guy who trained her like a dog. Then she pauses, remembering she's supposed to die by his hand, but lets out a tiny woof maybe without even meaning to. Right away, she asks what's going on with these ridiculous maid outfits. Seriously, what happened here? Alpha calmly tells her to chill out. What really matters is that everyone's okay. She stands up, glad that no one's being treated like a dog anymore, except she hasn't noticed she's got a tail now. Right next to her, the towering Kodori grins and says she's got it right. She won't be treated like a dog anymore because, well, now she actually is one. Confused, Falcon yells at her to pipe down, demanding she explain herself. But Kodori pulls out a mirror, holds it up to her face, and tells her to take a good, long look. Falcon's puzzled at first, then suddenly screams so loud it makes everyone jump. After all the chaos they caused, the foursome was finally whole. First up, their towering Alpha. Next, the fierce Beta who caught Kodori. The rank symbols were tricky to keep track of, but then came Crow. And last, the one who used to be Falcon, now going by Hayabusa. The rat tells her to smile for the registry photo, but she snarls back, threatening to rip him to shreds. Then her collar lights up, warning that she's showing aggression toward a master and a shock is incoming. Instantly, she bows her head, apologizing and saying she didn't mean any harm. Iso walks in, telling the Dan rat to quit messing around with his gross hobbies. She agrees, fine. Let's focus on the competition. He pulls out a box with balls labeled A and B. He's about to explain the rules when Katanori cuts in, saying no need to complicate things. She'll be the head maid, and the other three can just come at her right now. Crow's puzzled by Katanori's sudden personality shift, and Alpha explains it's because half her heart now belongs to a demon lord named Sierra. Iso says, fine, one-on-one might have been boring anyway. Let's do it her way. The scene switches to the battle arena. The three powerhouse women walk in together, towering like true warriors. On the other side, Hotonori raises a hand, conjures a throne out of thin air, and casually sits down, striking a cinematic pose worthy of a hero. She intimidates them, daring them to come at her. Hayabusa cracks her knuckles, saying, Kodori's face looks way too punchable, and I'm about to fix that right now. The main character, seeing her in her new dog form, mutters that she actually looks kind of cute like that. Then, bam. Lucille tackles him to the ground, yelling, I'm a dog too, for crying out loud. Thankfully, the goofy blonde jumps in to help cool things down, trying to keep the peace during all this chaos. But Iso just grabs both of them, tosses them out, and slams the door shut, saying he's done with those two. The rat urges him to look, and when he glances in the mirror, Hayobus is already pinned down. At the same time, weird markings start forming on Falcon's forehead, like they're locking down her mind. They didn't even get a chance. Isaizo is stunned. Covenor soloed both of them effortlessly. He thought the fight would last at least 10 minutes, but in less than 2, it was over. The two lie there, shaking, while Kavanori casually asks when they'll admit defeat. The rat whispers to Isaizo that maybe it's time to step in. This is way worse than expected. Suddenly, a sharp slash pierces the air, breaking the restraints. Both girls are freed, and a gleaming streak of metal is already aimed at Kodonori's face. Alpha just launched a huge, clean, and precise attack. Kavanori scowls, demanding to know where those old phoenix feathers went. Alpha smirks, saying she's not the only one who's gotten stronger. The scene flashes back 3 days earlier, when she told Iso she didn't care about being the head maid. She wasn't even interested in that title, but Iso asks if she thinks she gets to reject his decisions. Caught off guard, she says if he chose her, she'll give it her best shot. But she admits she only wanted to protect her friends. He laughs, saying she's missing the point. He hates being forced into decisions because of what he created. If he could build Katanori and shape her into what she is now, then he can turn Alpha into something even stronger. She stares at the strange metal, shining like ice, but it's not ice and definitely not silver. She doesn't understand it. Alpha then conjures a few more feathers, throws them forward, and one hits dead center on Katanor's forehead. Just then, the projectiles drop to the ground, and suddenly Kavanori's body dissolves. She reappears in her ultimate form, fully robed, declaring she's finally unleashed it. At the same time, Alpha apologizes, saying she also had to transform. She adds that as long as she's here, she'll always stand second to Kotanori. In that moment, giant crystal shards bloom around her, spinning as she floats in midair with flawless style. The two stand there, completely stunned, wondering how both of them got absurdly strong like this. Meanwhile, Iso and the rat are off to the side, placing bets on who's going to win. Then we flash back 2 days earlier when Iso explained that the world's most important material is called adamantine. It resonates deeply with its user's power and, most importantly, naturally repels mana, making it perfect for countering mages. The catch is that without royal blood, you can't tap into more than 5% of its true power. He's explaining all this, but honestly, even I'm struggling to keep up with the alchemy jargon. The silver ice alloy he created now uses adamantine to spark an incredibly strong anti-magic effect. The downside is whoever wields it can't cast any spells. But since Alpha doesn't use magic anyway, it's perfect for her. She can create her own cold metal constructs, but if she pushes it too far, her body will start freezing internally, turning her into a solid block of ice. Wow, that was a lot to digest. But yeah, that's basically the rundown. Iso tells her it's totally her call whether she uses it or not. Naturally, Alpha's on board without a second thought. If she plans this right, she's got complete trust in him. Then he lets her know she'll be injected with the Siren Queen's frost-resistant blood. Fast forward to the present, and Iso can't help but admire his own genius plan. Meanwhile, Katanari's struggling big time trying to impress him. She's overdone it with the mind and heart control lines and drained all her energy. Now she's barely holding her gown shaped together. The rat's thinking she might just pull off something spectacular, but Iso insists there's zero chance Alpha will lose. Both of them are yelling at each other to give up, when out of nowhere their powers cancel out. They both collapse, unconscious on the ground. Iso and the rat just stand there, totally dumbfounded. Then we cut to a sunny beach where that badass woman the one teased forever but never actually showing up, finally makes an entrance, lounging in the sun. Her friend next to her mentions that since she didn't help out during the bridge incident, the city docked 1,000 hero ranking points from her score. The woman adjusts her sunglasses, saying just because she's a hero doesn't mean she's on call for this crazy city 24/7. Her green-eyed friend reminds her she swore an oath when she became a hero, but the woman just tells her to zip it and back off. She only took the hero job to stop criminals from wrecking the city her dad built. Then another girl with a mask asks why she's not stepping up, since she already knows the chaos is stirred up by 2 Perserad family members. The sunbathing fighter says it's tricky because the leader might actually be her older brother. Her friend stares at her like she lost her mind. Seriously, you're the eldest daughter of Lord Gorgon. How on earth do you have an older brother? The woman explains her mom once told her something weird when she was a kid, flashing back to her mom saying, if one day you meet a boy who claims to be the master of House Perserad, never, ever turn him into your enemy. That was kind of oddly specific because, as it turns out, that boy was her older half-brother. The girl was blown away. She never even knew her dad had another kid. Her mom told her that someday she'd understand, but to make sure she remembered those words. Back to now, the woman admits she doesn't have many siblings, but the idea of one more doesn't sound impossible anymore. The masked girl insists that even if he really is her brother, he's still a terrorist. They have to take him down. Are you seriously going to let him run wild in the city? She asks. The woman replies, of course not. The moment he steps foot in this district again, he's going to learn exactly who Dad favored. That's the White Queen's media entertainment hub right there. Cut to Uncle Tom's burger joint, where the guys inside are practically drooling blood red. Their wives are pissed. You already know who's about to walk in. At first, I thought it might be Baba, but nope, it's Alpha bringing our guy his McDonald's. Oh man, but she's such a klutz. She spills ketchup all over the food, and now everyone's watching to see how this'll go down. Iso just sighs and tells her to stop making a scene, saying he can feed himself, but she's like, no way, as your maid, I've got to serve you right. She admits she didn't quite meet his expectations during the test. He tells her not to be so hard on herself. Just managing to summon multiple wings on the first try was already impressive. She blushes and says, if he really thinks so, she'll stick closer to him, even if it makes every other guy around green with envy. Meanwhile, Iso is getting annoyed. That woman is really making him wait. Even worse, she has no clue how risky it is to bring him somewhere he could take a bunch of hostages if he wanted to. Then the door swings open. Bapolia walks in, mentioning she happened to catch a criminal on her way here. The guys can't help but stare again, whispering that just looking at her should be illegal. Hearing this, she quickly grabs the 2 fools by their collars, warning them to watch their eyes unless they want to end up behind bars. They apologize nonstop, though honestly, it's tough to tell if they're really miserable or actually loving the attention before they top out. Watching it all unfold, Iso realizes this woman is leagues different from any leader he's met before. Of course, the cameraman catches every single angle. She sits down across from him, smiling, and says she didn't expect a criminal to be so punctual. Iso wastes no time, cutting the small talk and asking why she wants to take down the Kurumi family. She casually says the city of Gordon would be much better off without them. While she's talking, Bapolia is sneaking food right off Iso's plate. Alpha tries to say something, But the officer interrupts her, telling the former Shidori leader to keep quiet and wonders how someone like her ended up as a maid. Alpha is stunned, wondering how she even knows all that. Bapalia replies that as the city's director of security, it's only natural she's in the know. She got lucky because Ragmashi was about to wipe out Alpha's old crew. They ended up joining Iso instead. Alpha is fuming, ready to throw a punch, but Iso tells her to hold back. He looks directly at Bapolia and asks if she really thinks he needs her help with anything. She glances at the menu and says that if he didn't, he wouldn't have agreed to meet at all. Or does he really believe taking down a noble is that simple? Iso replies calmly, "Sounds like barely a challenge." She laughs and says he must not know about the 4 unforgivable sins. He cuts in right away. Of course he knows. The most infamous is the Black Emperor, also known as Hunter Realm. Rumor has it he's killed millions. Nobody can catch him. He's threatened nations, destroyed cities, committed massacres, enslaved people named any horror. The second is his personal favorite, Jack of Hearts, a shadowy magical assassin, so legendary he's even got his own TV show, airing the city. The third is the most terrifying creature of all, the Mind Slayer. People only know he exists, but whoever's seen him loses their mind completely. No one knows where he hides. And the last, deadliest one, is the Venom Archbishop, a mass murderer so ruthless that folks now avoid crowds altogether because when he shows up, no one's coming out alive. Bapolia claps her hands, saying he's got the summary down perfectly. If they're truly that powerful, the so-called unforgivable sinners, then which one of them has ever gone after a noble? Iso answers, none of them. Not even my hero, Jack of Hearts. Then he looks right at her and adds, that's why I, Perserad, am here to prove what it truly means to support this video, helping Mamoru create.